computer, so I'm going to record it. But yeah, I think are we good? What do you think?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Okay, go
Beautiful.
ahead. That's 7:43. I think it's good. Yes, we gave good time for the people to join.
All righty, here we go. And I'll expand this screen, obviously.
But can we do this? Can we go slide by slide and see if there's any questions? So make it more interactive.
Sure.
Because
However you want to do it. I'll do it
yeah.
however you
So
want.
because I went through your slide and there's things that we can discuss it even more extensively.
Perfect.
Okay.
It'll come up here in a second, I hope. I love it when it works. Let me move. I'm going to move this to the top. So you know what? Back in 2002, I wrote a book called Cracking the Metabolic Code. And what it was about was trying to get us to become aware of what I call whole body metabolism, meaning that we have these networks that are communicating with each other and we're not paying attention to those networks. And instead what we're doing is we're going to do a gut detox, or, oh, I'm going to treat your fatty liver, or gee, your thyroid's off, not understanding the signaling and systems relationships that are driving why there's dysfunction in a certain organ or a certain system. And so the whole purpose of for me, what I thought was incredibly, validating was the fact that, starting in 2013, they started talking about and seeing all these papers coming out in the primary referee journals on metaflammation and inflamm aging. And there's, obviously we realize that this is a byproduct of oxidative damage, right? So as we lose redox poise in our organs, my mentor started teaching me about redox poise when he was using the BioVincenz unit from Europe in 1986. He was teaching me about redox poise and the importance of understanding that interrelationship and the balance of oxidative stress, healthy oxidative stress, and then excessive damage that occurs. And that's what I'm kind of going to talk about. And hopefully I'm going to get this slide to move. Yep, I got it. And so it's going to start with this real simple position. I'm just making a position statement that when all of us sitting here tonight, our health as we sit here is the sum total of all the metabolic reactions that have gone on in our body from the time we were in our mother's womb to today. So our epigenetics, our metabolomics, our transcriptomics, everything is leading us down a path that is crafted who we are today. And then most importantly, it's crafting who we're going to end up being, right? So are we heading towards chronic health, or are we heading towards chronic illness? And I'd like to think that we're trying to, obviously we're working towards getting people to have healthier lifespans and healthier, just vitality as they're aging. That's been my ethos all along. And my practice has been vitality at every stage in life. If you're 8 years old and you feel bad, it's every bit as important if you're 80 years old and you feel bad, right? So, and then of course, what's your metabolism really directed by? Global metabolic signaling. What is the harmony or the homeostasis that's going on through all your organ systems? And, I look back, I stand on the shoulders of Reckwig and the work that he did, and Pissinger and his groundbreaking book, Matrix Regulation, and a lot of other people that have been discussing this field theory of we get sick from the organs down to the cell, right? That we create dysfunction and we get cellular dedifferentiation, and then cells become sick, and then tissues become sick, and organs become sick. And so how do we start to unwind that process that's going on? And so this was the first. So back in 2008, I'd been thinking about this for about 10 years and had been lecturing quite a bit. And I was seeing about 300 people a week. I had 3 rooms running full tilt, and I'd run between the 3 rooms 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, deconstructing people's metabolisms. And like I said, I'm a bricklayer. I'm not the smartest guy, but I kept seeing patterns over and over again in people where I started to see these clusters that were taking place. And so this was my first this is an historical document, basically. This was my first step at trying to figure out, well, what the heck is going on? And so if you look at the top, you see what are the inputs that start to change what's going on in a person. You know, and diet's important. I mean, some people, oh my God, you got to eat ketogenic. No, 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 you have to do FODMAP. No, 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 you got to be vegan. Oh no, you got to go paleo. Oh no, you got to go paleo, vegan, pescatarian, right? Whatever. One way or another, diets get skewed and it affects people's health. Drug therapy has a tremendous impact on cellular energy and cellular kinetics. And we pioneered a lot of the work, my team and I, on drug-induced nutrient depletion. We've written 4 databases on it, published on it, wrote the handbook that was used in the Lexicomp database. And our new database that I'm just finishing now is drug-induced microbiome disruption, where 25% of the drugs on the US market are thought to disrupt the microbiome and affect diversity. And so there's that piece to it with drugs. And then, of course, there's how much do you exercise? And I used to always think about, you know, it's just about people being couch potatoes. And the reality is that it's also about people who train too much, people that over-exercise. And there's a lot more people over-exercising. I can give you lots of examples of people in their 50s and 60s that are going into Orange Theory and they're tacking their heart rate up to 210 and they're wondering why they're developing palpitations and arrhythmias and they have anxiety, right? So exercise, incredibly important. And then environmental burden is obviously, you know, important. And remember, I first started getting educated on this, 1986, Dr. Alexander Wood, God rest his soul, he passed away 90 days ago. And he was one of my biggest mentors, brilliant man. He was talking to me about mycotoxins and biotoxins in 86, you know, toxic metals, pesticides, herbicides, plastics. I mean, just, you know, vectors, right? Bugs, environmental exposures. And then of course there's genetics. And then there's psychogenic stress or physical stress or trauma. And then of course there's what disease processes that person have. All those things are loading into this relationship. And so this was my very first, and I know the reason I'm showing you this, because this is very messy. And then the evolution of it after 15 years, I think it's become a lot more elegant and simple. But what I was trying to be able to do is show something like this. You could have a perfect diet. You wear your nubby Birkenstocks every morning after you do your sunrise salute. You drink 2 ounces of wheatgrass. You go to therapy. You pay for your therapist's therapy. You talk to plants. You make sure that everyone is harmonious. But at the same time, you're eating a ton of sugar every day. I love sugar. I'm a marathon runner. I don't need to worry about anything because I'm talking to my plants and wearing my Birkenstocks. Well, just the fact that as your blood sugar goes up, as you're eating more sugar and you're inducing a hyperpostprandial effect from your glucose, you're triggering more cortisol, you're triggering more adrenaline. And so that perfect lifestyle isn't synced up with a proper way of fueling yourself. And now you can start to create shifts. And so simply it's, well, I can go from stress hormones to causing a high gut permeability issue over here on the right-hand side, where I begin to trigger my histamine gene. I start to recreate more histamine. I create more leaky gut. I reduce nutrient absorption. My serotonin pool goes down. I develop food sensitivity. I start to develop autoimmunity that gets driven by this imbalance in the Treg cells, Th1, Th2 balance that you see here at the right-hand corner. And then this, of course, triggers inflammatory cytokines that start to alter how our bodies get signals. So for example, as IL-6 goes up due to inflammation, our insulin receptors retract, and now we lose GLUT4 capacity. And now we turn on GLUT1 transport. And that GLUT1 transport allows for passive glucose disposal, and that creates way more waste product, right? We make more lactate, more pyruvate, more intracellular acidity, more oxidative burden intracellularly. And I'll show you guys this just because I'm in my library here. This book, I got a really good opportunity to write a chapter in this book, Diabetes and Cancer, Epidemiologic Evidence and Molecular Links. This was leading researchers in diabetes and cancer from Europe. And I was fortunate enough to get to write with these folks. And what this did was this outlined the step-by-step approach of what happens as a cell devolves from being an efficient cell making energy to having heightened oxidative stress, excessive IGF-1, poor insulin receptor activation, and what the cellular mechanics are that drive that increase to developing a dedifferentiated cell or a cancer cell. And hence the epidemiologic evidence of people with cancer end up having more commonly, they'll have a much higher risk of the 8 common most cancers. And so this whole process of what I was doing was trying to create links and understand networks. And I'll stop so you can ask a question as it relates to this. But please keep in mind, this was 15 years ago thinking, so there might be something wrong in there.
No, I think you did good. Just people, they may need to know about the thing we discussed last night about cortisol. And now people, they think cortisol is anti-inflammatory. And the reality is that we need to have that connections more or better about sugar. When you have increase and then you have the insulin, sugar itself is free radical generator. It's causing inflammation. And then your body will respond to inflammation by increasing the sympathetic because you're decreasing the nitric oxide. You're increasing sympathetic. Sympathetic activate an oxidation enzyme, generate free radicals. But also the inflammation response is also cortisone release. And your body thinks the cortisone will decrease inflammation. That's what's happened for short term. But for long term, the cortisone actually causes an increase in the free radicals and causing inflammation. So cortisone in the short term, if it's only a spark, it dumps the inflammation by decreasing the COX and the LOX enzyme and decrease those prostaglandins. But if you have too much of cortisone and constantly high, then the cortisone interfere with glucose metabolism, causing high glucose. Glucose is a free radical generator. 5% turns into free radical glycans and causing damage. In addition to that, the insulin response will lead to activation of the free radicals inside the cells. So you end up with inflammation. So, which means that the cortisol is pro-inflammatory, it's anti-inflammatory or short-term, but it's long-term is pro-inflammatory. So people will have better understand about the cortisone because, there's mixed message there, right? You agree with me on that?
And we'll touch on that later, but that's exactly right. So what it's really about is, does your body turn off, whether you're looking at Navio's work, right? The cell danger response signaling work that Navio's writing about the last 2 or 3 years, or you're thinking about it in this metaflammation model, it's kind of this follow the path. And how many patients do you see this way where their cortisol, and I broke it down as I look at relationships like adrenal, thyroid, pancreas, glucose and insulin, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and thyroid hormone. Right? That's a core construct that when my stress hormones go up, my T3 goes down, my insulin will typically go up, my glucose goes up, and now I'm creating more oxidative damage. I'm creating less ability to burn fuel. And so you go from a person that has good vitality, good energy, good body mass to somebody who becomes fatigued and overweight.
And the other connection that we need to connect is that what's the relationship between high cortisol and the difficulty of converting T4 to T3? High cortisol goes high glucose, glucose generate free radicals, oxidative stress, and oxidative stress do inhibit the enzyme, which is the iodinase, preventing the T4 to turn into T3. This mechanism would make the doctors understand the whole connections there, and I think he will have better tools for fixing it. But that's the thing. I'm just trying to fill the gap, and I know you understand it, so you don't need to say it. But I'm saying it because other people are the first time and they are looking for that connection. This connection is in your brain already. Sometimes when you know things, you don't express it because you know it, right?
Well, one of the big things, I think one of the key learnings for me, and a lot of times when I'm lecturing at A4M, I'm talking to docs, I always ask questions like, oh, so you gave somebody T3. How'd that work for you? And they always raise their eyebrows because they're kind of like, well, half the time I gave them T3 and I didn't see the free T3 go up at all, or I gave them T3, and even though it was low, they started getting palpitations. Well, why did that happen? Down here in the corner, as your brain gets hyper aroused and you're not sleeping as deeply, you notice that you make more thyroid binding globulin. So you can give people a bunch of thyroid hormone and the body will just keep binding it up. So I always look at total T4 and T3 and free T4 and T3 to understand whether my body is binding it up or not. And the other piece to that is that, so when you look at people that are under stress, so for example, when they exercise people and they take them up from 70% of their max heart rate to 90% of their max heart rate, as your maximum goes up, your body will start to shut T3 down because it's the way that it regulates heart rate. So if you got somebody that's chronically stressed out, the way your body puts the brake on that, cortisol's negative feedback loop is say, hey, thyroid, slow down that heart rhythm.
Right.
But the byproduct of that over time is you get an enlarged heart. You're diabetic, you get an enlarged left ventricle, right? And so this connection, I'm going to go deeper into this. This is just kind of the genesis of thinking about whole body chemistry. So
Let me just add something here. When you give them those people with they have less T3, and you give them T3, you're activating the sympathetic. Sympathetic activates the NOx enzyme, generates free radicals, and free radicals blocks the iodinase, and you have less T3 again. So exactly. Adding T3 makes it even less and less, right? So this connection, that's where the doctors they feel it better. You know, you giving everything. I can understand it and I can interpret it, but I'm just trying to elaborate it for the people here.
Sure. Oh, I understand.
Get it.
No, it's very good. And look, it's real basic for me, guys. I look at blood pressures and pulses on everybody. If their pulse is above, resting heart rate is above 62, for every 4 points above 62, it's a 7 to 10% increased risk for cardiometabolic disease.
Right.
For every 4 points of a resting heart rate above 62, it's a 7 to 10% increased risk of cardiometabolic disease. And then I always look at morning and night. Like Doreen Saltiel is a fantastic cardiologist that's an integrative cardiologist, and she uses our methodology. And she likes to look at morning and evening blood pressures. Are you a dipper? Or are you a non-dipper? What's going on with your sympathetic tone? Because it's all really important. So anyway, the whole reason I put this up is to kind of let you guys know I've been thinking about this for a while. It's been something that has been eating me alive to continue to explain the cellular mechanics and signaling and cross signaling that occurs, because we know that when we just give a drug because, oh, you have an inflammation, we give you an anti-inflammatory. Oh, your thyroid's low, we give you more thyroid. We're not seeing that being incredibly effective. Sometimes people go, yeah, I got my thyroid, I got a little more energy, but they didn't lose weight. They didn't necessarily get cognitively sharper. And so it's, what are we really trying to accomplish? And I always talk about cause and consequence, right? We want to get to cause and look downstream at consequence and try to correct it from there. So this is a way, I added this slide from last night to kind of show this. This is the way I look at things. So you'll notice when we get to talking about the metabolic code and triads that you look at people, and this is how it goes. If somebody's got a 95 blood sugar, they have basically, if you look at the Kaiser Permanente studies, it's 6% risk of becoming diabetic for every point over 84. So if you're getting a bunch of people coming in that have a 96 blood sugar, a 95 blood sugar, 95 blood sugar is a 60% risk of being diabetic in the next decade. But if you're a 95 blood sugar and you have a 25 insulin and your GFR is low and your homocysteine is elevated and your vitamin D is low and your hemoglobin A1C is slightly elevated and your cortisol is elevated and you're making a lot of oxidized LDL, that person is way farther along of that glucose damaged path than just that person that's got a 95 glucose and none of those markers are off. And I don't think we do enough of connecting those dots. And so the way we explode data, and with my 18 years teaching at the College of Medicine and Pharmacy in Cincinnati, and then teaching at GW and teaching at A4M, I always have my students research what, if you have an elevated homocysteine, what other organ systems is that tied to? If you have an elevated glucose or insulin, what other organ systems is that tied to? and then create the what's called Bayesian modeling, right? Extrapolating that data and pointing to the cause. Where is the tip of the snake at? Where is the head of that snake? Because otherwise, what we end up doing in integrative care, and I was on this talk with a neurologist, and it's like, well, I learned when in doubt, begin with the gut. That's exactly the problem. It isn't always when in doubt, begin with the gut. It's begin with causality. And when you begin with causality, now you start to correct downstream consequence. If someone's anxious and nervous and not sleeping, they will have a leaky gut just because of the cytokine release and the Claudin-2 activation in their belly that makes their tight junctions disrupt. And now they get permeability issues. And I'll show you a picture of that. I added that in tonight too. So the point being is I can give them gut stuff all day long. And if I don't correct the signal that this person is anxious, they're nervous, they're not sleeping, I'm really not correcting what's going on in their gut. I might make it feel better for a little bit, but I'm not getting to the cause. And so it's identifying cause and consequence.
Can I get in there really quick?
Of course.
Dr. Lavelle, thanks. It's awesome to see you speak. I've always seen you speak at A4M events, and
Oh, good.
I know how thorough you are. And I mean, this, no matter how many times I hear it, I feel like I get a better understanding. But we've been talking so much with Dr. Halassa, and we've been using nanomedicine techniques in order to decrease neuroinflammation. And obviously there's a cause that goes even above that, but what's causing the neuroinflammation based on the slide that you put. But it just makes it so much more like important. This idea of a nasal spray that has nanoparticles with antioxidants inside of them in order to try to eliminate or to reduce neuroinflammation because it's causing problems downstream. But also I with cortisol being more at the in the middle of this whole thing, how do you see the autonomic nervous system in relation to cortisol? And I know it's all connected, but I see cortisol as kind of being in the middle.
Well, I think it depends. So this is a great question. It depends on the genesis of the neuroinflammation. I'll show you some slides later on. I've got pictures of the terminal ileum 6 hours post TBI, and you see a complete erosion of the gut barrier. And so I think that cortisol in and of itself, like I have to deal with autonomic tone, not just in my athlete population, but I'm measuring autonomic tone, sympathetic, parasympathetic tone virtually on everybody that comes in, because in the end, whether we're looking at a POTS syndrome, right, or a person that's stuck with their, with anxiety, and their heart rate is, say, at 75, and their heart rate variability is at 15, so they don't have any flexibility to their nervous system. It cortisol, and then it's that enteric nervous system that's there too. So you got to keep in mind it's the hormone cortisol, but I don't think we appreciate adrenaline and noradrenaline enough is one of the drivers that's really starting to kind of, it perpetuates cortisol. For example, when you upregulate your sympathetic nervous system, say due to neuroinflammation, it could be a trauma, it could be a toxin, whatever. You upregulate the enterochromaffin cells, which then signal corticotropin releasing hormone via the sympathetic nervous system. So you got the sympathetic nervous system triggering corticotropin releasing hormone, which acts peripherally to increase histamine, but it's also acting in the periphery to increase leakiness to the gut. At the same time, that sympathetic tone is telling the pituitary to tell the adrenal glands to pump out more cortisol. And so it's all this mesh or milieu that's going together, where even people that may not necessarily be particularly stressed out, but if their glucose is disturbed enough, they're upregulating that adrenaline and noradrenaline, and you could still get to that autonomic, kind of like dysautonomia, without particularly having crazy rises in cortisol.
So let
So it's
me
kind of
go
this
ahead and
balance.
link something here, very important. You said high cortisol causes leaky gut syndrome, high cortisol causes histamine. And the reason why, we find out just recently that cortisone, when they suppress the whole immune system, it also shifts more into Th2 and Th17, which increase the interleukin 4, interleukin 6. Interleukin 4 stimulate the immunoglobulin E and release of histamine.
Up
And
here.
interleukin 6 is the one who causes overinflammation in the gut and causing the leaky gut syndrome. So that's the connection.
Yeah, and how it does it, just to really finish the, like, to be precise, is IL-6 turns on Claudin 2. Claudin 2 will causes your tight junctions. The upregulation of Claudin 2 breaks the tight junctions. And now you get an increase in zonulin, and then that gap starts to occur. And so, yeah, that's exactly what happens. Did that help at all, Dr. Joseph? Was that helpful, that explanation, or no?
No, actually, I mean, it's helping me. I have a lot more to learn. Obviously, I know this for myself, but it's pointing. I'm starting to get a even clearer
Cool.
understanding. So thank you.
Good, good. That's beautiful, beautiful. So the only thing I really want to kind of drive towards is that, look, in the end, what we're talking about all drives the aging process. Like a lot of you know, I developed synapsin, another thing you spray up your nose that's targeted at microglial cells. There's a lot of, there's ways that we have to target balancing our chemistry, right? And at the same time, we got to deal with the trauma of things at times. So I can't wait to show you that head hit and what went on with the terminal ileum. So inflammaging, low-grade chronic inflammatory processes, it creates peripheral and central inflammation. So as Dr. Halassa was alluding to, you get that central activation of the microglia, creating a tremendous amount of oxidative damage, right? You get prostaglandin upregulation, superoxide anion, hydroxides, peroxides, all damaging your neurons. The neurons die. That releases neurolaminin, laminin, which then triggers more microglial activity, right? It's like that perpetual cycle of neuroinflammation. And that's going on in the head, but it's happening in the peripheral tissue too. And so that's why we see, at least for me, it's so important to understand that relationship between, you know, what's going on centrally and peripherally and how I need to address it. So let me go to this. And really, this is simple. This is, you know, basically what contributes to metabolic inflammation. It was all the stuff I had across the top of that very first slide. Bacterial, parasitic, viral. Nobody takes enough care. I mean, I was lucky I learned from doctors in Germany. They're huge on dental and making sure people don't have, you know, periodontitis, gingivitis, pockets. You know, what's the effect of their amalgams? What's the effect of their posts? You know, so that's important. And then of course, you know, misfolded and oxidized proteins and cellular debris. And, you know, one of the biggest things that prevent us from clearing that is the fact that people eat too much, they eat too often, they eat too late, they're under stress, and they don't get enough rest. The bottom line is autophagy, which is triggered by a periodic and time-restricted eating, or basically what I call, what my grandma used to teach me, Jimmy, eat breakfast, eat lunch, eat dinner. And you're done with dinner at 5. And if you're a good little boy, you get a little treat maybe at 6:30 or 7, and then you're done. You know, and we've lost that. We have so much food around. People don't realize when you eat, you prevent autophagy. And when you prevent autophagy, autophagy is the countermeasure to inflammasome signaling. So if you're not eating in a circadian method, which we realize now, the Chinese may have been right, that the Shen cycles of the body, the 24-hour clock of how organs turn on and off, the latest evidence being the nighttime lymphatic flow activation that occurs in individuals when they're in good health versus when they have neuroinflammation, right? There's a clock. And so diet is incredibly important as a part of metabolic inflammation. Sleep quality. Yeah, go ahead.
So doctor, is time-restricted eating really the only way to prevent or to enhance autophagy and prevent misfolded proteins?
Well, I mean, you could breathe structured water from Germany, right? That's a good way to work on misfolded proteins. But I would say it's probably the best, one of the best ways. One of the other ways to think about it would be, because one of the big things that happen that cause that damage is insulin resistance, right? I mean, insulin ends up creating a lot of advanced glycation end products that ends up creating a lot of those misfolded proteins, right? You're sticking sugar on top of proteins. And so when I say diet, I'm not so worried. Like, I don't really restrict people like the 16-8 restricted eats. I think that I'm on the advisory board with Dr. Longa at their, I'm on his advisory board for El Nutra. More importantly, all the research they do at the Keck Center shows that if you do too much prolonged fasting on an ongoing basis every day, you actually start to starve your organs. So I'm not a big advocate of what a lot of the popular folks are doing, which I believe is, 16-8, which I think is actually, when I look at blood labs on people coming into me that are doing that every day, I see variants that I don't like. I see, their liver enzymes are off a little. They end up having a little more, they end up having, less efficiency, in their chemistry. Their glucose is up in the morning. So it's one of the easier ways to work with autophagy, along with really managing that glycation process that's going on. And then, of course, this other piece of environmental burden, obviously all of us have done a ton of work at looking at environmental toxicity, like, lead, mercury, cadmium. I mean, just had a guy in Parkinson's case, started on him 6 months ago. He was, as a child, he applied all the pesticides for his parents on their garden. And then as an adult, he learned how to do gardening from his parents. So when I did his toxic metal profile, he's, tremendous amount of arsenic, a lot of lead, a little bit of mercury. He's got lead arsenate, right? Use that, an old school pesticide was lead arsenate. They still use it on olives, in fact, and non-organic olives. So if you buy Greek olives and they're not organic, you got lead arsenate on them. And so I basically worked on him the last 5 months, and his gaits improved, his stiffness has improved, his tremors improved because of that toxicity side, right? So these are key things, inflammaging and metaflammation. This was in particular yin and yang type 2 diabetes. And then, so this is the process. And this is what Dr. Halassa was actually referring to. Acute inflammation is good. It's a way to repair. Cortisol going up is good short term. IL-6 is great. If I train, I'm going to make a bunch of IL-6. And I make IL-6 to stimulate satellite cells, which create tissue anabolism in my muscle. That's good. But if I'm overtrained and I never turn off the IL-6, that I create sustained inflammatory signaling, now that becomes catabolic. And so it's not, people, oh my God, IL-6, that's bad. No, it's good, just not too much, right? And so that's the whole purpose, acute inflammation versus chronic inflammation. Yeah, and so I'm going to go to a slide that shows this because I think it's a better way to show it. But basically, in a homeostatic model, pro-inflammatory response is balanced with an anti-inflammatory response, and it's homeostatic, right? Homeostasis. And with repeated stress, you create neuroendocrine immune dysregulation. So it affects hormones, it affects neurochemicals, it affects all of our signaling at our receptors. And that ends up triggering a prolonged inflammatory insult. And that insult is the byproduct of that is tremendous oxidative burden. You can just look up in any journal of nephrology, just look up what causes kidney damage. Like I said, I'm a bricklayer. And what comes up? Loss of redox poise. So heightened oxidative damage is what damages your kidneys and leads to kidney failure. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for that, right? But the bottom line is it's chronic inflammatory signaling, heightened oxidative burden, triggering an accelerated process of damage in tissues and organs. And then chronic stress. We already went through this, so I'm not going to go through it again, but it's basically, elevated chronic cortisol elevated inflammatory cytokines, elevated noradrenaline and adrenaline, leads to chronic inflammatory signaling. You recruit monocytes. So one of the big things I look at to find out if people are in a metabolically inflamed process, I look at their percent monocytes, and I look at their percent eosinophils, and I look at their percent basophils, and I add those three up. And if those three numbers are over 10, right? You got a monocyte of 9, an EO of 3, a basophil of a half. I'm at 12.5. They're starting to load a metabolically inflamed state in their body. And then the other way to look at that is look at their neutrophils, right? Because neutrophils is the more you push the immune system towards a chronic inflammatory state, their neutrophils start to drop out and they trend low. So I look at a lot of basic labs and can see these kind of things because they're in the literature. That's what they tell us. Mean platelet volume, for example, MPV is a great marker for metabolic inflammation. The higher it is, the more metabolic inflammation. I actually got a slide on it later. So this is kind of what we were talking about. The bottom line is we can starve ourselves. That's a problem. We can have overnutrition. It's an issue. We can have excess alcohol. It's an issue. We're inactive. We don't get enough sleep. We get an environmental burden. We get stressed out. We can over-exercise. We can have drug use. All of that is pushing towards metabolic disruption. And Dr. Alasa and I were talking about this the other night. Look, you got basically 42% of the US population is clinically obese. Over 80% of the population now is overweight. 50% of the population is either pre-diabetic or diabetic in adults. So this is the construct. All of these things push towards inflammatory signaling. And as soon as this inflammatory signaling, what really makes it kind of dangerous is you get a leaky gut, you get endothelial cells that get leaky, and you get a blood-brain barrier that gets leaky. And now things like lipopolysaccharide, which is circulating from a gut that's undernourished, can now cross that blood-brain barrier and trigger your glial cells. And so it's understanding that people were kind of being shoved in a funnel with their lifestyle, and the output is at the bottom. That chronic illness and disease is at the bottom of that funnel. And they express based on what are the things that it came into them. Is it metals? Is it smoking? Is it stress? What is it that are the pieces that push them there? And I think a better way to look at it, let me see if I can give you this one. I love this slide because it's so simple. If you look to the left, you see over here, this is what causes damage. And this is your inflammation response, right? You cause damage, and you can put stress here. You can put environmental burden, all the things we talked about earlier. Then you have an inflammation response, like what Dr. Alasa was talking about. It's good to have cortisol. It's good to have cytokines. It's good to have this family of inflammatory processes going on, but it's supposed to turn off right here. The effect is decreasing inflammatory signaling. And, there's so many details. Like I have lectures on every one of these topics that go underneath this. This is kind of a broad stroke, but basically inflammation is supposed to turn off, and then the person is supposed to heal. The problem is here. When people maintain chronic stress, meaning their cortisol stays elevated, their diet is poor, they're being like I had a guy in with rheumatoid arthritis, and pain in his sternum, nodules on his fingers, nodules on his toes. Well, he grew marijuana illegally here in California, and guess what he's exposed to? A ton of mold and a ton of pesticides. So for him, this systemic effect, he was never turning off inflammation due to the environmental burden that he was getting. So if you look, here are the key things that happen with metainflammation. One is that you get more dyslipidemia, more oxidized LDL, LDL particle numbers that are going high, like 2,400. You get more myeloperoxidase, apolipoprotein B, fibrinogen goes higher. These are just key cardiometabolic things that you see happen under metabolic inflammation. the next thing that happens is that you start to lose your muscle perfusion under this inflammation, and you start to get sarcopenic. So people start to lose muscle mass. And we know this in people with diabetes, right? Just look at people that are insulin resistant and diabetic, for example, because this is an easy model to talk about. They lay more fat in their muscle, right? So they have more fat in their muscle. The next piece that happens, so they get sarcopenic, they get dyslipidemia, then they start to see a change, and I'm sure you guys are seeing this. People have a ferritin pool that's very low, but an iron pool that's kind of normal. And that's because inflammatory signaling from cytokines turn up hepcidin and turn off a compound called ferroportin. And ferroportin is what signals your body to take iron into the reticuloendothelial system and store ferritin. And that also triggers EPO production. And so now I'm not making, a renewal of my red blood cells. And so it's a common feature when you see people with really good irons, or at least solid irons, and a ferritin pool that's really poor, they've got underlying metabolic inflammation. The next piece that occurs is that, and I already said this, but it's as you become metabolically inflamed, your insulin receptors turn off. So you have less IR1S and IR2S activation, and that decreases your insulin signaling. That leads to the Warburg effect or GLUT1 transport, which means you go from making 38 packets of energy when you're efficient, like a Prius, to 2 packets of energy like a gas-sucking SUV. Not that I'm against gas-sucking SUVs. I'm just saying that's the effect in your cell. That as you create GLUT1 transport because of metabolic inefficiency, the waste product of that is lactate and pyruvate. You start to induce hypoxia-inducible factor 1. That triggers your mitochondrial DNA to start to transform into an immortal generator of cells. And that's the process that goes on. So as you go across here, you see bone loss due to elevations in TNF-alpha and IL-6. You see over here that with neuroinflammation, this decrease in neurogenesis and cell plasticity. And then, of course, we see the ultimate progression towards this is cell dedifferentiation, right? Mitochondria lose energy. I lose biogenesis. I lose my NAD to NADH ratio. And why that's so important, a good example of this are COVID folks. So one of the features of folks with the whole experience in any virus is that when the virus attaches to the cell and then breaks off, your PARP enzymes get upregulated. And you need NAD for PARP enzymes in order to fight the cytokine storm and the virus progression within the cell. And so if you're low in NAD to start and you get hit with a virus, it allows for a much more explosive cytokine response. And so this is the chemistry of a person with, chronic heart disease, cardiovascular disease, cardiometabolic syndrome, syndrome X, looking at folks with diabetes, looking at folks with autoimmunity. This is their chemistry. This is what happens. And so we find people with mild to medium bone loss. They're sarcopenic. They have different types of anemias, either macrocytic or microcytic, right? They're normochromic, hypochromic. And then they begin to notice changes in their mental function. So I'll stop here on this slide because you told me to stop on slides.
No,
It's a
you
pretty
did
cool
very
slide,
good.
right?
I'll make it so simple here for people to understand this. It's insulin resistant because those receptors are oxidized. One of the things when you have too much of free radicals, do block the receptors and make things insensitive for all the drugs and for all the chemicals in your body. Those receptors will become insensitive. So that leads to insulin. And then osteoporosis is the same thing when you have too much of free radicals and you activate the immune system, and especially with cortisol, will shift everything to Th17 and interleukin 6. And yes, this will activate osteoclast, and this leads to osteoporosis. Mitochondrial dysfunction, you have too much of free radical, you oxidize the iron of cytochrome, and you will have problem with electron transport chain. and you will end up with mitochondrial dysfunction. Of course, the neurogenesis because of the neurogliosis due to oxidative stress, inflammation, sarcopenia, the same thing. I think it can be explained just by oxidizing those organelles and receptors, and that led to all this malfunction that you see here.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to point out is, remember, people are on drugs that are depleting coenzyme Q10, which is incredibly important for the electron transport chain. They're on drugs that are depleting B vitamins, which are incredibly important in energy generation. And this isn't one or two drugs. Most of the drugs that are given, and I'd invite you to look at this. It was a really interesting study looking at just acidic urine, like what's your urine pH, right? Because the more acidic you are, the more oxidative you are, right? You can't get by that. And there's been some really elegant papers published showing that you can regulate someone's glucose with drugs. You can give them something for their lipids. You can give them something for their blood pressure, give them an angiotensin II blockade of some kind, or, an inhibitor, and it will not limit the progression of renovascular disease at 1 iota, or the progression of their global endothelial dysfunction. And that's, to me, that's why we need to talk about redox potential. That's why the first thing I do on people is get a urinary and salivary pH to understand what their global acidic expression is. And so
let me add something here about the drugs. All the pharmaceutical drugs with long-term use interfere with mitochondrial function. They're not compliant with mitochondrial function. And all those drugs that we made, none of them being tested against the mitochondrial dysfunction. And most of them, they cause mitochondrial dysfunction, and mitochondria will be end up with source of pathological free radicals, which will shut down all those physiology that we're talking about, leading to insulin resistant, osteoporosis, and the things that we just discussed.
Yep.
But nutraceutical, most of the nutraceutical God-made products is compliance with mitochondrial function, does not interfere with mitochondrial function. So that's why you can take nutraceutical as much as you can. You don't see the harm of it. But drugs, it has good for short term, but long term, you end up with oxidative stress due to mitochondrial dysfunction.
So a comment, doctor, and a question. It seems to me that most of the drugs for metabolic disorders are the same ones that block CoQ10. So I'm kind of confused.
Let's say, for example, statin, right? Statin is good. Nitric oxide donor. Statin is good, but it's nitric oxide donor, which is good, and it's antioxidant for short term. But then statin interfere with the mitochondria and causing free radicals and causing the damage. That's why you need more statins, and you end up with that vicious circle. You got my point. The problem with man-made drugs interfere with mitochondria function.
So the way I would, I always drew it out when I was discussing cardiometabolic issues and drug therapy. Think about the patient. So let me, because it's really important that we see this. So Joe comes in and he's 30 years old and he's 40 pounds overweight and he's got a 260 cholesterol and a blood sugar of 95. And blood pressure is 130/90. And we tell Joe to eat better and get some exercise, Joe. And I'm going to give you a statin. Joe starts to take a statin. He starts to create problems with his mitochondrial, dysfunction, which leads in 9% of the time, just the data off of just look it up. It leads to diabetes or insulin resistance when you take a statin. So first of all, if you're going to take a statin, make sure you're repleting all the nutrients that are depleted by that statin, which is more than just CoQ10. It's vitamin D, it's selenium, it's carnitine, it's omega-3 fatty acids. But Joe then gets put on what? Metformin. Then you go, oh, Joe, your blood pressure really hasn't gotten any better. I'm going to put you on an ACE inhibitor and I'm going to deplete your zinc. And so between the statin taking the cholesterol out and the zinc going away, now Joe's testosterone's going down. And now Joe's saying, wait a second, my blood pressure's going up a little bit more. And now I got to put you on either a beta blocker or a calcium channel blocker. And oh, by the way, I'm not losing weight. And so the progression over a period of time is more meds, but really not seeing, you're seeing better numbers, like the numbers in the blood look better because of the drug. But if you look at Joe, you go, wow, Joe, I don't know how good you're looking, buddy. Because
Right.
if Joe
Yeah.
doesn't change his diet, and if Joe doesn't get on board with taking some nutrients to neutralize the free radical damage that his lifestyle up to that point has happened, Joe's not going to see big progression towards really being well. Joe's just going to be a good candidate for more medication to keep him in that window of acceptable numbers, which will decrease his mortality overall, right? I mean, but it's not going to give him the well life that Joe's looking for.
Dr.
So-
Lavelle, what you commented on there that's really important is when we started this entire process and we started this group, one of our goals was to look for the value of the root cause of the disease. And what you pinpointed there is exactly that. In your patient presentation there, no one addressed the root cause of the disease first.
Right. Exactly.
You saw through to that. Now, you see what I'm saying? The mitochondrial dysfunction is actually at the root cause more so than any of Joe's habits, really. If we correct the habits, it'll correct that. So I want to just point that out for the group. That's one of our goals, is to discover these root causes because they're extremely powerful clinically.
Yeah, without a doubt. So
Very interesting about statins. I didn't realize how many other nutrients besides CoQ10 they disrupted.
Hey.
One last comment on the drugs. It's my understanding metformin also reduces B12 and CoQ10, but yet it
correct.
seems in literature that it extends life some way. So now I'm still confused.
Well, first of all, Sinclair's book I think it's good. I think that he's extrapolating on metformin. Metformin disrupts the microbiome too, by the way. And you should always be measuring methylmalonic acid if you're taking metformin, because you have to see whether or not you're upregulating, methylmalonic acid and decreasing that B12, because that's where they start to get into neuropathy. And so I'm not, metformin, once again, it's something short term, but in the end, if I'm not getting rid of the oxidative damage or getting rid of, say, the arsenic that's sitting on the insulin receptor, or not reducing the stress and cortisol that's causing the insulin receptor to retract back into the cell membrane, if I'm not getting to that cause, how many people do you see that are on metformin? And yeah, sure, they lose some weight. I'm going to give you that. And I'm not going to say, oh my God, it's a drug. Nobody should use it. But there's a lot of people that take it and they kind of hit a wall in terms of how well they get. And I know, that's all. It's just
Let me go ahead again.
Guys, if you want
Metformin
me
is the
to-
same like statin. They're nitroxide donor. They're antioxidant. And nitroxide, it involves in increasing the insulin sensitivity. So yes, it does help to drop the sugar. It does help to decrease the weight and all that good stuff. But metformin also interfere with mitochondria and cause mitochondrial dysfunction. And that will lead the mitochondria to release free radicals. It damages, as you said, the microbiome, leaky gut syndrome. So short term is good, long term. But if you use metformin and you use other antioxidant, it's possible that you can contract the side effects of metformin. So
That's
metformin
right.
by
That's
itself
exactly
is not
right.
good. Statin by itself is not good. You really need to work on giving the supplement that counteract and improve the mitochondrial dysfunction. I think one of the good ones is methylene blue. The only bad side of methylene blue, it does interfere with microbiome. So you need to give microbiome when you give methylene blue. But methylene blue does help to improve the mitochondrial function. It is anti-aging. It does help to buffer the redox, but it interferes with microbiome. So that's why shooting in the dark is not anymore the right thing that we're doing. We need to have a measurable way. And I think you're doing very good with your lab. But another one that we need to work on, which is, I think I have Mr. Ken here, is also doing endothelial function. It's billed by insurance. ANS, it's billed by insurance. So we can get
100%.
the functional effect of all the therapies that you are recommending, not just numbers of the lab, because the number of the lab in chemistry does not necessarily reflect the physiology and functional.
Of course.
So I
Correct.
think endothelial function test and ANS is going to be the stethoscope of integrative doctors. I believe integrative doctor without measuring the endothelial function in ANS is shooting in the dark. So I think it needs to be mandatory, having it in every center of integrative centers.
I could not agree more. And that's why we're super passionate about measuring autonomic nervous system in our practice, because it tells us whether we're given the right things or not. It gives us a
Super
really good,
important. And
yeah,
I think, Jim, you remember, many of you may remember that there was a whole group, I don't know, it must be at least a decade ago, that, all the doctors wanted to be on metformin, and they weren't thinking about all of these other effects of it. And they weren't necessarily so, people would come into my office and say, well, I'm taking metformin because it prolongs aging. But really, again, most medications are studied in the short term, right? Acid blockers for reflux, they're studied for 14 weeks, but everybody takes them for 14 years, and there's enormous adverse effect related to that. So I think that, it's really important in this group that we continue to do the type of teaching that Jim's doing to learn the mechanisms of what these drugs do. But most importantly, as we've said, I mean, I've kind of beaten this horse a little bit too much, but we have to document that we're making the appropriate change physiologically as opposed to the number.
that's right. And if you guys want, I mean, I just updated I have an ebook that's the drug and nutrient depletion handbook. I kind of updated all the latest information on that. I can send that to you, Dr. Halasta, when you send me your email through the real phone number that you have.
Sorry.
So
That's
I'll be glad to
Kathleen,
share
Dr.
that with
Kathleen,
you
the one who
guys.
gave me your phone number. And I was calling and the guy's not responding. And I has a background of a song about waiting and conference
your
calls. and he's
cortisol is
very
going up.
excited that guy.
I'm melting your brain down, man. But I'll be glad to. I've even got my handbook that I put together for the drug-induced microbiome disruption. I'll send you guys both of them if you want. I mean, that
Yes,
way you
please.
got
I
a
would
quick
love
roll.
that.
Okay, I'll make sure I get it to you guys. So this is just another look. This is just another simple construct. A lot of people end up with gut disturbances and they get allergic to food and they get allergic to environmental burden. And just remember, just the simple fact that people have allergies triggers inflammation, activates reactive oxygen species, releases more pro-inflammatory cytokines, which triggers more immune activation. You follow the cycle here of dysfunction until you break it, the cycle continues. So it's about breaking these cycles of damage. So let's see here. Let's go. And then, of course, we talked about stress a little bit. And I don't think I'm going to go too much into this, but it's pretty obvious. As your stress hormones go up and your DHEA pool goes down, you damage the hippocampus, you get more insulin resistance, you start to lose adiponectin. If you want a good marker biologically for oxidative stress, an easy one is adiponectin, an easy one to get. The lower the adiponectin, the higher the insulin resistance. The lower the adiponectin, the higher the insulin resistance. And adiponectin, it's basically because of losses in AMPK. So when you give alpha lipoic acid to help somebody with diabetic neuropathy, the reason that it's working is that first of all, it acts as an antioxidant and it scavenges peroxyl nitrite free radicals, right? When alpha lipoic acid gets converted to dihydrolipoic acid fights peroxyl nitrite and then downregulates vascular adhesion molecule, okay? So that's the sticky part. The other reason is that alpha lipoic acid upregulates AMPK. That turns on your adiponectin. And now the insulin receptor goes, I know what to do again. So you see that. So when you start to look at why am I giving a supplement, I know I get very granular, but if you understand how something works, you can apply it in all your methodologies, right? And how am I going to fix this person? And so when I look at alpha lipoic acid, it's antioxidant, nephroprotective, upregulates adiponectin, downregulates superoxide anions, and then with the conversion of dihydrolipoic acid, peroxyl nitrite anions, which decreases the stickiness and upregulation of the endothelium via vascular adhesion molecule. All right. So that's kind of just why adiponectin is kind of an important little player and how you can use a nutrient like alpha lipoic acid to correct that.
It's a marker that comes early too. You can see early the decrease in it. It's pretty
100%,
early on.
Kathleen.
Mhm,
That's right. That's right. It's an easy marker.
mhm.
I mean, I've got a million markers. I've got them in here, but this is a biggie. And this is just kind of a look. This is what we talk about. chronic low-grade inflammation feeds the root of the weed. You got genetic predisposition, you add stress, you add lifestyle and aging, and what do you bloom? You know, heart disease, metabolic diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, and cancers. And I think this is a really simple, this is a nice thing to show patients, you know, but I like to reinforce it from talking about all that cell mechanics I just talked about. The net of it is this. And so when we look at chronic stress, what's going on? With persistent inflammation, you get what's called persistent inflammation and immunosuppression and catabolism. It's called PICS. And this is what, what Dr. Halassa was talking about on these shifts with Treg cells and moving towards Th2 immunity and creating immune activation, and then looking for other markers like TGF beta 1 or melanocyte stimulating hormone, and seeing these shifts that are occurring deep within individuals. And one of the big things that we start to see are anemias. And I'm really big on looking at where are they at with their red cell width? Where are they at with their ferritin? What is their iron looking like? Because a lot of times it gets missed. Sometimes in men, iron doesn't even get measured if they're going into their traditional doc. Right? I mean, it's like, you're a man, you don't have menses, you don't have a problem with iron. But yet we're not looking at things like ferritin, and yet we look at their platelets and we look at their red blood cells and go, why is this person petering out? And it's because of, with metabolic inflammation, remember the hallmark trait is anemias in that far left corner of that diagram that I had. And I've kind of went through this already with stress. Let's move on from that. And once again, I'm big on measuring monocytes, because monocytes are the window, macrophages, right? Monocytes, macrophages, triggering endothelial dysfunction. So I really like to look at monocytes, because the higher the monocyte count, the more I can count on more inflammasomes. And of course, the NLRP3 inflammasomes, kind of the real bad, kind of damage associated particles that get made in response to either a vector or due to cytokine signaling. And then that's where you get that increase in IL-1 beta. So why do we measure IL-1 beta? To see how metabolically inflamed someone is. It gives you a window, an easy window to see where are they at with their metabolic inflammation. And this is old school, but I just threw this in here because I just think, especially I put this in here for you, Dr. Halassa, because you were talking about that central role of cortisol. So I wanted to pull this out of one of my other slide decks. This is a 2013 Endocrinology and Metabolism Clinics of North America article. And I thought these guys nailed this. This was such a good slide, because as my free cortisol goes up, I inhibit gonadotropin releasing hormone. I make less test and less estrogen if I'm a woman. And guess what? What do we end up doing with these guys? We give them testosterone. And what do they end up doing part of the time? Their hematocrit goes up, their hemoglobin goes up, they throw a clot, their body doesn't respond positively to the testosterone, because we didn't address the reason why the testosterone went down, which is they're already in a chronically inflamed state, and pumping super physiologic amounts of testosterone into someone in an inflamed state is only going to trigger more inflammation.
Right. The other thing is that when you have oxidative stress and you have too much of free radicals, it blocks the receptors of testosterone. It blocks the receptors of estrogen, testosterone. So if you give those 6 hormones, it will not work, because you're blocking the receptors. They're insensitive because of too much of free radicals. And I think that's what's happening to those patients who are shooting in the dark, and they're giving 6 hormones regardless of the metabolic code, and they overload them. And at the end of the day, they put them at risk of high blood pressure and stroke and all that stuff. And that's the reason why they are shutting down those clinics, and they are abusing 6 hormone therapy.
A lot of them get more endothelial dysfunction because of it.
Right.
That's simple.
Especially testosterone. Yes.
Exactly. So over here, of course, we get a reduction in growth hormone releasing hormone, which has its downstream effect on IGF-1 and GH. And then, of course, at the top here, we see alterations in TH1 and TH2 balance. And then we see changes in neurogenesis, of course, with elevations in free cortisol. And the net effect of this, the beauty of this is, which I can't figure out, is why we still don't recognize cortisol as a big problem when this was published a decade ago almost. Osteopenia, sarcopenia, syndrome X, cognitive decline, immunologic compromise, leading to fractures, frailty, cardiovascular disease, memory loss, and infectious complications. That's our whole population.
Right.
I mean, that's America, So this slide just, I don't know, it fires me up a little bit, I think. Inflammation in thyroid. So once again, as your CRP goes up, you get subclinical hypothyroid. So as your TSH is going up, so when you start to see TSHs above 3, and I would even say start at 2.5, they have an increase in IL-6 and TNF alpha. That it's going to be there. So they're absolutely related. And I have a study, or not a study, I've got a slide that's really sweet. This is a great slide showing it. So as I start to get leptin resistant, and I start to pump out more IL-6, and I start to have more free fatty acids, and I start to induce renin and angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2 conversion, all these things are going up. That increases oxidative stress. That oxidative stress triggers an inflammatory state, which triggers low thyroid function, low T3. Now, low T3 induces oxidative stress, just like giving too much T3 induces oxidative stress. And so this is a vicious cycle that occurs. So until you break this port right here, I need to knock down this bottom right-hand corner. You will not correct a thyroid person. It won't happen. I mean, and so if they're under a lot of stress, if they're eating a lot of sugar, if they're glycating, if they've got a lot of environmental burden, if they've got biotoxins and they're creating all this oxidative stress, it's going to be very hard to get them back to a normal T4, T3. And inflammasomes I kind of went over already. And this is more of just kind of what happens. I'm big on kidney because I think I look at kidneys as a major way to gauge how damaged the person is. Think about how many people you're seeing now when they're 55 and 60 with GFRs either in the very low 60s or in the 50s, right? We never used to see that. Kathleen, did you used to see GFRs in the 50s in a 55-year-old?
50% of my patients have GFRs at 60 or lower.
Yes. And it's a key feature of redox loss. And so when you think of this as inflammasomes get upregulated for whatever reason, and our reactive oxygen species get upregulated, and we see here intense mitochondrial dysfunction, increases in IL-1 beta, endoplasmic reticulum stress. So I'm getting a lot of engorgement of cell debris, right? Because I'm not inducing an autophagy. I'm creating misfolded proteins. It drops to not just endothelial dysfunction, but glomerulosclerosis and tubulointerstitial fibrosis dysfunction. And now I'm damaging those kidneys. And I mean, you can turn them around. I've as you know, I mean, Kathleen, we've talked about this a lot. I've got people with 40 GFRs that we get them back to 65 and they're 75 years old. So telling me that, oh, they're 75, you can't recapture kidney function is a bunch of crap. I mean, you literally, with correct oxidative therapies, the correct redox applications, and the correct detoxification, and the correct, I'd say, nephrotic support. So things like Solidago and Shatavari, which are really good botanicals, you can return GFR, and even in people in their 8th decade. And I think it's a shame that we just say, oh, well, you have kidney disease now, you're stage 2. Well, we're going to wait around till you're stage 3. Then we're going to give you some sodium bicarb to keep you from going to stage 4. Right?
True.
Yeah.
It's totally true.
Yeah. And I learned about this. My brother had he had a brown recluse spider bite that ended up, after a while, he had an invasive cellulitis, and he ended up in the hospital once. They gave him too much of a of an antibiotic IV, blew a hole in his duodenum, ended up in renal, pancreatic, and liver failure all at once while they were going to do a Roux-en-Y on him because the ulcer that they blew in his belly was too big to be able to cauterize. And so I had to learn about kidneys really fast. And we put 10 more years on his life because, he had a 1% chance of making it out of surgery. It was so bad, right? We got him out of surgery and we worked his kidneys, and he got 10 more years of life. God rest his soul. He, passed away 2 years ago, but he made it a lot longer than he was going to. So this is a really important tip. And then, why are sirtuins important? Why is resveratrol important? I like Thai ginseng. Thai ginseng is about 5 times more potent than resveratrol with SIRT1 activation. So I'm a big 5,7-dimethoxyflavone Thai ginseng, and it's a 5% is the one that was studied. But you upregulate SIRT1 to activate your mitochondrial biogenesis. That's why you're giving them. So you think of SIRT1, you think of AMPK, because those are major pathways that help with activating mitochondrial biogenesis. And why do they do it? Because sirtuins do what? They turn on our antioxidant gene expression. That's what they're doing. So you're telling your genes to get back to work and start acting as antioxidants again. Start making antioxidants. I only put this slide in here for one reason, because everybody we know, you make a lot of noxious adipokines when you're overweight. I'm doing it because I wanted to show you right here. Here's our little friend adiponectin. And when adiponectin is adequate, it raises insulin sensitivity and blocks the promotion of inflammatory effect of decreased insulin sensitivity as people get leptin resistant. So this is a good marker. And we're trying to keep people and improve their insulin sensitivity so that they don't move down this insulin resistance pathway. And of course, you're getting it from 2 ways, because those adipokines start to create more advanced glycation end products and more oxidized LDL, which trigger all the inflammatory compounds, which are raising the insulin resistance. So why do we want people to lose weight? No, it's not because everybody has to be beautiful. It's because we're trying to make them live longer. My brother was 476 pounds. All right. I love all size people because of it. I can tell you that right now. But I still got him down to 280. I had to wire his mouth shut. No, I didn't. He's an older brother and he's much bigger than me. I couldn't do that. But I had to be in his ear every day for 3 years until he finally succumbed to, okay, I'll start eating better. And of course, there's the gut. And just as we already talked about, a leaky gut leads to bacteria, toxins, immune reactivity, all sorts of inflammatory signaling that goes on into the bloodstream. And of course, stress, if you look here, it alters gut motility. We create permeability. It alters the microbiota. It changes mucosal flow. And all of that leads to this kind of change in the enteric nervous system, the signaling of the gut to the brain and the brain to the gut. And that, of course, starts to alter all of these things over here on the right, which is more cortisol, more cytokines, more leaky gut, altered microbiota, which now creates changes in leptin and ghrelin signaling, and along with a host of other functions, right? But this is, so stress in the gut in the brain, and then the brain back to the gut. And I just love showing this picture. I can't help it. I just put it in here because I love seeing what a leaky gut looks like, because everybody used to laugh at me in the 1980s when I talked about leaky gut. Physicians would say, yeah, right, your gut's Swiss cheese. Sure it is. And it's like, wow, now we've got pictures. Here is a healthy cilia. Here is an enterocyte with leaky gut and broken down cilia. Here is cracks and crevices in the gut. Here is a healthy gut. It actually does happen. And here are the pictures to show it, right? So anyway, that's it. And then, oh my gosh, the autonomic nervous system. So you're asking the importance of, the ANS. It's because the more we lose our heart rate variability, the more we send our autonomic signals to the gut that lead to gapping of those tight junctions. So the less I control vagal tone, the more I create disruption in the gut, which then alters immune, endocrine, and neural pathways. All right, pretty straightforward. And we know what leaky gut leads to. A lot of different issues, right? You can have food allergies, hormone problems, thyroid problems, vitamin problems, cravings for food, you name it. And this is one of the features that I always try to get people to understand on histamine is that when you start to trigger genetic histamine expression, and if you've got genes for histamine and you've got them turned on, and you say you're a SIRS patient, maybe you're kind of in that world of biotoxins, and you got those histamines, that histamine turned on, it's more than your mast cells that produce histamine. Although, for example, in your kidneys, you've got a tremendous amount of mast cells that went under chronic inflammatory states, you create a tremendous amount of histamine, which creates damage in your kidneys. But look at the other areas of problems with histamine, right? Palpitations, arrhythmias, blood pressure issues, nausea and vomiting, loose stools, stomach pain, bloating. So we think that it's all about, oh, wow, you're eating gluten. Well, yeah, maybe that's triggering a problem. I can't eat gluten. I don't do well with it. But my point is, get back to the cause. The cause is that you turned your histamine activity on within your cells, and that triggered all these different types of symptoms. So if you look here, periods and cramps, dysregulation, missed periods, endometriosis, all of this is driven by histamine. And I think we underappreciate the global aspect of histamine. And this is being driven by metabolic inflammation and the triggering of excessive oxidative burden of the cell.
So managing allergy, it's part of managing chronic disease. So patient has sinus, allergic rhinitis or allergies to anything, it definitely aggravate any underlying chronic diseases, right?
I don't know how you really thoroughly treat coronary artery diseases without managing a person's allergies.
Right.
Yeah, it's a must, because otherwise otherwise you have all of this kind of metabolic spillover that occurs. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, one of the interesting things go on with histamine. My first real knowledge of this, I had a woman come into me, she had insomnia. She went to every doctor for insomnia, took every drug known to for insomnia. Came to me, started working on her. I'm not getting her right either. I'm giving her stuff for anxiety, giving her stuff for sleep. Nothing's working. All of a sudden I thought, wait a second. People take antihistamines in order to go to sleep. This is back in 1997, I think. This is a long time ago, back when I didn't have so much gray hair and when I had more hair. So the point was, I said, I think I'm going to do a food allergy panel on her. I get a food allergy panel back. She was IgE for ham, IgE. And I said, hey, what do you eat? And she's, well, every night before I go to bed, I have a ham sandwich. And I just told her all the pills I freaking wasted on her because I wasn't thinking systemically. I took her ham sandwich away and she slept like a baby. Crazy, right? The stories we can all tell.
You found the root cause of the disease.
It was ham. Exactly.
The ham did it.
It was the ham that did it. This is just another, like the latest theory on why people get obese. In a resting microglial activity, there's normal HPA axis feedback, and the microbiota control the lipopolysaccharide. The liver is able to filter the lipopolysaccharide. You guys are familiar with LPS? You know that LPS gets produced when you get reduced blood flow to the gut, bacteria die. Or you could kill the bacteria by using glyphosates or swallowing any number of noxious items or taking drugs. Drug therapies can kill the microbiota. So when you kill the microbiota, you create circulating endotoxin, which is known as LPS. LPS crosses the blood-brain barrier, triggers gliosis, cytokines, alters the HPA axis, and now from that, we see changes in thyroid function, glucose utilization, and a storage of fats. And this is kind of a somewhat of a newer model that's just explaining one of the big triggers. It's not the only trigger in my opinion, but it's a big trigger that makes sense to me, because lipopolysaccharide is one of the best things to trigger microglial cells that we know. It crosses the blood-brain barrier beautifully. Once again, just to reiterate, it can start with stress. You could live the perfect life, but you're stressed out. You don't take in any toxins. You never eat a baked potato that was wrapped in aluminum foil. You only eat organic food. You know, you you do everything right, except you're under a lot of stress. So here's the loop. We upregulate the CNS. We upregulate the HPA axis. As we do this, glucose tolerance is changed. We become insulin resistant. We start to create things like non-alcoholic fatty liver. The sympathetic nervous system changes the endothelium, which creates peripheral inflammation. Here's that endothelial response due to the upregulation of the sympathetic nervous system. And now the peripheral pro-inflammatory cytokines travel and trigger the microglial cells. I actually met the guy in Italy that stained the first circulating endothelial cell that was releasing inflammatory cytokines. This was back in 2007. I was in Italy, in Milan, and I was at a pharmaceutical company doing some consulting work. And the guy came in, and the first thing he said to me is, "You Americans are stupid." And I went, "You're right. I'm a bricklayer. You're right. I got it." And he said, "You probably don't know what this is." And he shows me a picture of it, and it's a purple ball with this staining in it. I'm like, I don't know. It looks like it could be in the Louvre in France. It could be a picture for all I know, right? I don't know what this thing is. And then he went on, we kind of had a nice conversation after I told him how wonderful he was. He said, this is a metastatic model for heart disease, right? Heart disease is a metastatic disease. When you think of endothelial cells detaching, not sloughing, not dead, circulating, releasing inflammatory cytokines distally, and creating distant damage to tissues and organs. That's what this is showing you right here, how that happens. All right. A question on this one? Is this cool? Does this make sense? Very cool. Okay.
Yeah, this is so-called the psychosomatic diseases. A lot of people, they think psychosomatic does not exist.
Exactly.
I went to one group, it's called JABA, and I talked about oxidative stress and psychosomatic and all that stuff. And the people there, they say oxidative stress does not exist. It's fantasy. Some doctors, they don't believe in all these things. It just, for them, it's
They don't believe in oxidative stress.
not real.
Okay.
Right.
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing they took chemistry and organic biochemistry. I'm very happy. So this whole thing of chronic heart disease, the thing to keep in mind is that as my LPS gets upregulated and it attaches, European Journal of Heart, 2015, the progression of multi-organ failure in heart disease is due to excessive oxidative burden to other organs delivered by lipopolysaccharide. So as you lose that blood flow to the intestine because of your heart failure, and you start to make more lipopolysaccharide, it travels systemically, attaches to other organs, and is one of the driving forces of multi-organ failure. So that's the whole reason behind this. So you get a negative ionotropic effect on the myocytes because the LPS actually attaches to the myocytes, induces NF-kappa B, induces mitochondrial damage, and then of course creates the cascade of all the inflammatory compounds that are consequent to the NF-kappa B.
A lot of doctors, when they talk about the gut brain, and they say your brain is in the gut, and they start talking a little bit gibberish about the the neurons there, and talking about it, then making it so complicated. It's very clear leaky gut syndrome is basically it's because of the leakage of the epithelium that lines the gut with those free radicals generators, which are the toxins from the bacteria, especially the pathogen ones. and it goes all the way to the brain. But a lot of interpretation from doctors when they say gut in the stomach, and there's another brain in the stomach, and the way they explaining it is really completely complicated, does not make any sense, and they're lecturing it in A4M, and I don't
And
understand.
kind of inaccurate, just to be perfectly honest, kind of inaccurate.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because it's not that hard to see, and we always have to remember too, our own immune system is attaching to those toxins that are falling through that endothelial disruption or the enterocyte disruption. And then they're releasing enzymes and pro-inflammatory cytokines. So our immune response, it's not just the toxins, we're creating storms because
Right.
we've got this leaky gut, and we're eroding the lamina propria at the same time.
And
We're
you add
shrinking
to that, you have something is called neurogenic inflammation, where
Right.
the nociceptive neurons, they start releasing neuroinflammatory in the gut, and that will aggravate the whole inflammatory cycle.
Yeah,
So
right on.
patient, they may have, yes, sympathetic tone is part of it, but also nociceptive neurons, if they are being overactive, it can also release those neuropeptides, and they can be inflammatory and aggravate. That's ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease and irritable bowel syndrome. Part of it is neurogenic inflammation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I like to bring up is this. We always think of the lymph as just cleaning things up. The lymph is cleaning things up. Not really. All the recent evidence that's being published now is showing that the lymph play a role in endothelial proliferation and chemokine production, that it is actually induced, it induces the lymphatics to trigger chemokines. So the lymph is not just sitting there passively saying, oh, I'm digesting things, I'm the filter. It participates in inflammatory signaling. And I don't know, a lot of people, it's kind of like, I don't know how much they appreciate the lymph network and how much it can drive inflammatory signaling in the body. So I do a lot of lymphatic drainage on people. I try to get the lymph to unload. Part of the way I do that is through autophagy. Part of the way I do that is to kind of reduce the foods that they're reacting and creating histamine. So I try to find that out. And then I'm always doing things like, giving, things that are going to restore redox potential, right? So quercetin, luteolin, great examples for this, by the way. So let me kind of get to a example of the metabolic code here real quick. I just listed some slides. I'll be glad to send you guys these slides if you want them. I mean, you're more than happy to use them for yourself. If you want to study them, it's fine. So these are the things I commonly look at. And I never just look at labs. I'm tracking where their blood pressure is at, where their autonomic tone is at, where their resting heart rate is at. What's their symptom survey look like? What's their coordination like? Like a lot of times, I'm looking at reflexes as well, and seeing what they're are you able to stand on one foot and plant stably or not? So I mean, I do a lot of, I'd say probably odd things maybe that I'm trying to get a feel for. Where are they at? Obviously, dilation of their pupils. I mean, you got to do a good physical exam. You have to do a good physical exam. So my docs and my nurses, I've got a protocol that I have them do. They've got to do a very thorough physical exam of someone so we understand what they're expressing from the nervous system perspective. But then there's all these labs, and these are things that you can get at LabCorp, at Quest, I mean, anywhere, right? I'm not, saying, oh, do a organic acid urine so you can find out what it's like to be a 6-year-old autistic kid, since that's what all those organic acid studies were.
So can you go over? Okay.
That works for traditional labs. So markers in the late life stress, excessive physical activity, excessive to the plate, inflammation, genes. And I just had 3 Hall of Famers today I worked on, gold jackets, and they're all getting their brain scanned.
Can you go over why are you doing galectin 3,
Oh,
F2
I lost-
azoprostein, and MMP9? Those are things. Oops. Is there any problem?
Yeah, I
think-
think we lost
We
the
lost Dr.
presenter.
James. Yeah.
Yeah, he was having some internet. When you hear those strange sounds, folks, that's the internet connection of the person speaking isn't working.
He needs to get the 5G.
Yeah. Well,
It's very
I think I
interesting
got
and it's
the
very
1G.
entertaining, his presentation. It syncs very well with everything that we want to present. So he will be a very good candidate. And I think I'm putting him under Dr. Kathleen. So you're going to deal with him because you have a good relationship with him, seems like, and he's responsive to you. So go ahead, you have him.
Well, he's a
Hey,
great
Dr.
guy. Yeah,
Halassa.
he's been around a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think he'll jump back on here in just a brief moment and be my guest. He's
Hey.
probably had an interruption of his internet or his either that or his laptop battery has expired and he's searching for the.
Hey guys, I got a quick question. You know, directed towards anybody. You know, maybe mostly Dr. Halassa, just because we're talking about a specific angle with nanomedicine. But this is kind of a first grader question. I feel like, because I feel like I'm constantly going back and like relearning all the time. So in essence, if I had to just dumb it down and say, okay, we have these stressors that are the cause, and all the different reasons, all the different stressors that hit a person that create a chronic stimulation. And basically, and let's imagine that it's really primarily starting with the brain, and that there's really three systems that are active at the same time. We've got the nervous system, you know, primarily the autonomic nervous system. We've got the endocrine system, and that would be, you know, cortisol and norepinephrine and all those components, and all of their effects on all the different organs, and the immune system, obviously causing inflammation, and all of their effects on all the different organs downstream. And really, that at the deepest, the end of that
Wow.
whole process, the breakdown is the
Why am I having
oxidative
problems,
stress.
guys?
Oh, I thought you were saying wow because of what I said.
Can you hear me?
Oh, let's see who's on. Hold on.
We
Oh,
can
there he
hear
is.
you.
Hi. Yes, Jim, you're back, I think.
I am.
Oh, nice.
Okay. You can finish your thought, Dr. Joseph.
Okay. So I'm trying to dumb it down. The schematics are great. I could stare at them for hours or run through specific cases, but I'm trying to just have a basic. This leads to this, leads to that.
All right.
And so we've got these chronic stressors, and there's really basically three systems that flow out of the brain: endocrine, autonomic nervous system, and immune system in the form of inflammation. The endocrine system, obviously, in the form of cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and those are really the three main components that are having their effect on every organ system. And the damage at the deepest level, the common damage, would be the oxidative stress. Is that the simplest?
Let me
way
show you the
to-
model that we built, and maybe that'll help you to make it even simpler to explain to your patients. But
Okay.
you're right. In the end, things distill down to creating oxidative damage and glycative damage, right? Both oxygen and, you know, glucose-based damage.
Okay. But there's no other system. And the reason why I say this is because you know, the thing I think that's throwing me off is I'm going in this direction and that direction, because the charts are brilliant. But if I had to really have it, you know, put some order in my brain,
Well,
these three basic things are happening all at the same time. You've got the cortisol going up, you've got the sympathetic nervous system going up, the parasympathetic nervous system being dampened. You've got the immune system and inflammation and all of the interleukins that are traveling and triggering other things downstream. And they're all happening at the same time for the,
Well,
in simple
I
terms.
think what Jim, is trying to get, he's showing a lot of information that he's developed over time. And so what
Right.
you're doing is you're learning a lot about these systems and the way they work. But after experience, Dr. Joseph, what you're going to be able to do is synthesize. So you
Right.
learn this as your base, your foundation. You can come at it from any angle you want initially. And then you try another angle, and then you try another angle. Like people think the gut, or people think the brain, or people think the toe, or the nose, whatever they think. But they start somewhere, and they use these slides to learn and to go back and to practice whatever way they have to start. And then what they do is they synthesize in the end. Once they understand and they see their results, you have to experience it. You will have an ability to synthesize.
And
Okay,
you'll
so
build on it.
you'll,
I mean,
Right.
and when you say, okay, and so you'll be able to see things, see all different components happening at
Let me-
once. And what I'm
let-
not saying, and by the way, what I'm not saying is, this is too complicated. No, I'm just
Right.
saying
No.
after, I'm just basically saying, would it be safe to say there's 3 basic systems being activated at the
Well-
same time, and they're all having all these different effects downstream, and at the end result, and the damage is really, you could safely say, oxidative stress
Yes.
at the chemical
Yes.
level.
Absolutely. So
Yes.
let
Okay.
me show you a way to make it a little easier. But that's right. So
Well,
this
that's
is that
fun.
post TBI
Love this.
ileum, right? Look at the breakdown in the belly,
Wow, huh?
right? Pretty crazy, right? It's the Journal of Neurotrauma in 2009. We've known it for a while, but yet nobody's figuring out that when you hit your head, you're going to get immune disruptions systemically. And sometimes people have lingering effects from their TBI because they've got gut issues that have occurred. And the case I'm going to show you, I'm going to use the same case I did the other night because it's a great case.
Brilliant.
Got a bunch of other cool cases. But so this is
You
kind
have
of what
every Thursday here, so you can finish up the whole thing. Don't worry.
I got lots of cases.
And we got a
man.
lot
I
of
got tons
Thursdays.
them.
Don't worry.
Cool. We can stop whenever you want. I'm all
No,
good.
no. Go ahead. Until you feel.
This is great. We want to hear this for sure.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
anyway, so this is how I did it, Dr. Joseph. I figured out that I needed to break things down. People learn things in 5s and 3s.
Wow.
So I created
Nice.
5 networks that are physiologically written about in every medical journal. Adrenal,
Brilliant.
thyroid, pancreas, gut, immune, brain. So adrenal, thyroid, pancreas, this is the triad of energy.
Mhm.
So I'm talking to a patient and I go, hey, your cortisol's off and your sugars are up and your thyroid's down. Hey, you know what? You're a triad 1 person. That means your energy's low and you're gaining weight. And they go, yeah,
How'd you know?
that's exactly what's happening. I'm gaining weight and I feel tired and I'm a little anxious. I'm craving sugar. Cool. Now I know where to start. Triad 2 is gut, immune, brain. Triad 3, which is for resiliency, right? How resilient am I against the vector? How resilient am I to stress? Am I in allostatic load or am I in allostasis, right? Triad 3 is about endurance. And, what's my cardiopulmonary neurovascular tree and network look like? And triad 4 is about detoxification. And triad, which is liver, lymph, kidneys, which does more than detoxification, but to communicate this to the consumer, my patient. And then triad 5 is about self-esteem and potency. And I can explain basically anything going on with the person by stacking these. So you can kind of think of this as Garanimals meets systems biology medicine. So I use all these relationships are written on in the literature. There are lab values that validate it. There are symptoms that people feel. There are biometric analysis that they get. There's wearable data analysis that supports all 5 of these. And you can pull that data together and go, you need to start here. I need you to start, and most people need to start in these first 2 triads. This is where most people are really off. They may have, high oxidized LDL and you need to, give them some stuff to neutralize that. But typically high oxidized LDL, lipid particle size, lipid particle number, ApoB, it's being driven by over here, stress hormones and insulin and glucose. And so it's really, it's based on research, clinically relevant. It helps you to deconstruct patients. And it's trying to point you in a direction of where to start, because it's that same old story of you go to these courses and everybody goes, oh, everybody start. My point is, I don't really need to, but I know I can look at all your labs, I can do a good exam, I can get your biometric, I can amalgamate all that data and say, where do you trend most highly for where your metabolic dysfunction is? And I'll show you that with a case at the end of this. And so really,
Your internet is not good. Oops. Another internet. He needs to buy a good internet.
One thing that'll help I've noticed when people are doing that, if they turn their video off and they just put their picture up there, it takes a lot of the load off of their internet connection, and their audio will come back. Yeah, the video is the data intensive part of it, especially if people have like I can see that
I'll take
Dr.
my picture.
O'Neill has
I'll take
very
my
high
video out.
resolution picture.
That would help.
You know what I mean?
There
Dr.
we go.
Joseph does. It's a lot of bandwidth.
Okay, my video's out now.
Well, it's not you. It's not you that's causing it. But you know what I mean? Like when Dr.
No, his internet connection is not good. There's nothing to do, and I pay for this service. It's not
I know,
free.
but it's from him. It's not from you.
So even I think his connection is weak.
Yeah, but if he can somehow, well, I guess he can't turn the video off because he's screen sharing. That might be why. But if you can turn the video part off, where just the picture, there's just your plain picture there, it uses less bandwidth.
Well, I hope that's the case, because
let me see. He might be back. I think he might be back on. See, because we might just be losing his video.
Let's go.
try it. Can you hear me?
I don't know.
We can hear you, Jim.
Can you guys hear me?
yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me or no?
Yes.
Yeah, and we can see your screen. I think if you have your video off, it might help your bandwidth. And you do now, so that's perfect. Try that.
Able to hear me or no?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
Yep.
Yes. I don't think he's hearing us, right?
Oh, you may be right.
Text him telling me we're hearing you.
You guys can hear me, but you're really
Yes.
grainy on my side. So I don't
Yes,
know
we
if
can
I'm getting
hear you.
across
Yes,
to you, but
text
I'm
him,
going to
text
do a
him.
case.
Kathleen, can you text
I
him,
hope
please?
that my
did.
sound
Yep, I
kicks
did.
in.
I did text
Yes,
him.
you're okay. You are okay, Jim.
I
You're
told
good,
him I
you're
texted
good.
him. We
Just
can
give
hear
him
you.
Are
thumbs
you
up.
able to hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, he sees us. Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
I'll text him. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, he's out again. He needs to fix his internet or get some good service there. What
Somebody
He
needs
needs to
to-
walk over
Somebody
towards his
who
router.
needs to.
Can you
Or
guys
maybe
hear me?
he's
to
in the
let him in.
basement.
Yeah, good.
Could be he's
Walk
hiding in the
upstairs.
basement and there's no connection there. Wi-Fi is far away from him.
Wow.
Are you there?
Does anyone need to let him in?
I cannot hear
He's
you
in.
guys. Let me look at my.
We
It's
can hear
better
you.
now.
Yeah.
I can hear you perfectly now.
Okay, go ahead. We can hear you. Yes.
Perfect. Okay, let me go through a case real quick. So this is a case.
Share your
of
screen. Share your screen. Your screen. Share your screen.
Oh my gosh.
Can you share it? Okay, let me give it to you. Just wait a
I
minute.
can
Wait.
just get.
I think we have to give him the thing.
Okay, let me give it to you. Yes, make a co-host. Okay, go ahead. You got them.
There you go, we got
it.
Go ahead. Yes.
So I did this case the other night. And I'm just going to do it again because I've got.
You have next Thursday. Don't worry. Next Thursday. Just go ahead. Do whatever.
You got it. Okay, here we go.
Yeah,
So
May
this is a
Thursday.
guy. So this guy, polo player, 52 years old, and his horse decided to make him fall, and then the horse decided to land on his head, and this was the result. He had a TBI, and he was a elite strength coach, worked with a lot of pro athletes. So here's his information: blood pressure 159/98, heart rate of 60, salivary pH of 6, urinary pH of 5.5. He's 72 inches tall. He's 220 pounds. He came to me because he was fatigued, bloated, achy, inflamed, and he had his concussion from the polo accident. He's currently on 3 grains of armor, and he has trouble with his energy. He's on testosterone replacement. This is bringing up what Dr. Halassa was talking about. People are being given these meds, and they're not accomplishing what the person's giving them to them, and they're just staying on them. He craves foods, but bloats. He's mentally foggy. He struggles midday. He's gained weight and lost strength on testosterone. His business is exploding. He's on a lot of stress. He's got a 31-year-old wife who's pregnant. So he's 52, she's 31, and they're expecting their first child together. He's irritable for meals missed. He craves carbs. He's up 20 pounds. He gets a headache if he goes too long without eating. So he's dysglycemic. He wakes up at night to eat. He crashes between 2 and 5. He has lost his focus and short-term memory. He's emotionally flat, irritable. His ability to exercise is down. His body temperature is down. He's had headaches since his concussion. I already talked about his bloating. He has stomach pain after he eats. He doesn't get over colds and flus the last 2 years. He clears his throat frequently. He has postnasal drip, sinuses, allergies. He has joint pain and inflammation. He's falling asleep and can't stay asleep. He only gets 5 hours of sleep typically. He's restless. He perseverates, and he eats past being full in order to cut off an emotional craving. And then he gets mood swings. Feels out of breath going up steps. His blood pressure is elevated. He's not medicated. His head feels heavy. His sex drives down. He has trouble maintaining an erection. So where do you start? So this is our scoring system that we use. And on the left, you see numbers. And you can think of those numbers as a metaflammation index. Or if you want to put it in your guys' terms, especially Dr. Halassa, it's his oxidative index. This is the totality of all of the symptoms he's feeling, his biometrics, and his lab values. And it's trying to point to where you need to begin. And so the higher the number, the more stress on this network. Numbers over 500 indicate elevations or high stress. So he's got 2 here that are mid-range, but triad 1 and triad 2, gut immune brain, adrenal thyroid pancreas are the 2 big areas for him. And you can see that he has a lot of a lot of his values here are in red or in yellow, and they're driven by all of the analytics that we do. All right. So this starts to tell you, gee, what am I doing? How am I going to work on him? Basically, we develop a predictive aging index. And if you listen to all his symptoms, how well is he aging for a 52-year-old? He's not aging very well, right? Look, think of all the symptoms this guy's got. You know, he can't get an erection. He's overweight. He's gassy. He's bloated. He's tired. He's got short-term memory loss. He's obviously got headaches from his TBI, but I mean, he's not aging very well. Here's his labs. And let me see if I can put this up at the top so I can see it better. So if you notice, his cortisol is kind of okay, but he's really on more like it's trending low because he's had too long of a time of probably having high cortisol, but we don't know. His sodium is high, and typically when sodiums like this are up, it's because the adrenals are really crushing that sodium and needing it. If you look at what's really going on with him, here's where it's at. He has autoimmune thyroid, and he's being given Armour thyroid, 3 grains a day. So he has antibodies to thyroid tissue, but yet he's taking 3 grains of thyroid tissue and putting it into his gut every day. So that's a big mistake. And then the next piece is, if you look, I mean, his hemoglobin A1C is slightly elevated, but really nothing here is incredibly off, other than his serum magnesium should be more up above 2.2. And so when you're insulin, as you start to get insulin resistant, you start to spill your magnesium, spill your potassium, and retain your sodium. And that's kind of the very early sign of what's going on. But really, in his case, take a look here. Remember I said about looking at eosinophils and monocytes? So even though he's got a normal monocyte and a decent eosinophil, his basophils are a little bit up. When you add those three together, his gut is a little bit broken down and his vitamin D is low.
Well, basophil is high. That's mean his interleukin 6 is high.
Exactly.
All right.
You need to, I need to sit in the classroom so you can teach. This is exactly right.
No,
A lot
no,
of
we're
people
just
don't realize
learning
that on
from each other.
basophil.
There's a lot of things we're learning here from you. I'm
This
just
is
plugging
good.
up the things that's, you know, keeping
No,
up with
that's
you.
that basophil is a clear sign of high interleukin 6. I'm glad you brought it up.
Right.
That's exactly right. And now if you look at his LDLs, I mean, his cholesterol is not bad, but look where his LPPLA2 is loading, right? So he's
Right.
got some lipoproteins that are kind of going up. His blood pressure's on. He's got endothelial dysfunction, right? 159/90 blood pressure.
I
And
like
he's very
oxidized
acidic.
LDL, so why are you
pH
not adding it in your oxidized LDL?
Well, I can show you other ones where I measure it. Just in this case, 2 years ago, in the panel that he did, he didn't have oxidized LDL in it. We measure oxidized LDL and myeloperoxidase all the time.
Okay.
It's a great. We have it in the. That's why I was going to show you some other next time. I'll show you
Okay.
some other case studies where we
Yeah,
have that.
next Thursday. Okay.
Yeah, cool. The big one here is there's not a lot going on here. I mean, his liver's not so far off anywhere. His kidneys are, his creatinine is trending and his bun's a little high, but you know what? He's an athlete. He trains. He's very busy. Eats a higher protein diet. But now let's see what's really going on.
You don't think he's
So his gut is leaky. What was that?
dehydration?
He's
the bun
he's
is
a little
high.
dehydrated for sure.
Right.
Yeah, he's a little dehydrated for sure. And but look what's going on. His testosterone's at 1429. His estrogens are at 150 plus.
Yeah.
So he's super physiologic on his testosterone. He got a hit to the head. He has endothelial dysfunction. And then, of course, he's got all these allergies and his gut's off and he's very bloated.
So most of his problem
the
is coming
story-
from testosterone and estradiol, and all those is increasing the blood pressure and causing the inflammation.
Well, what happens with estradiol when it's excessive in men? Estradiol and estrone, right? That's a
Right,
big
so
problem in men.
Right, and increasing reabsorption.
So
Right.
So here's what we did. And this is just to show you how quickly things can happen. We put him on something for stress that reduced his cravings for carbohydrates. That's a triad 1 event, right? Reduce your stress. We gave him something to kill bad bugs. We ended up putting him on nystatin, but we gave him started him on some grapefruit seed extract to kill off some bad bugs. That's
Is
a triad 2.
Relora is polyphenol?
Relora is actually magnolia and philodendron. It's an adenosine A1C activator. So it binds to adenosine A1C, lowers anxiety, and lowers physiologic cravings. So they actually reduces stress eating patterns, like him getting up in the middle of the night to eat, him craving foods and craving carbs. And they got FTC approved claims on that. So that's pretty well studied. We gave him a probiotic. We gave him a phospholipid to start getting his acetylcholine back, right? Because his parasympathetic nervous system shut down. You start giving phospholipids to bring that acetylcholine back up. We gave him a high resolvin fatty acid. What that is you're giving him a fish oil that's high in resolvins to shut down his inflammasome activity. We gave him something. The Sierra Sil is basically a trace mineral product that's really good for reducing inflammation.
Is
We
it
gave him
selenium?
Moducare. Now, this has selenium in it. Yeah.
Okay.
We gave him this Moducare because of his autoimmune thyroid. Now, I gave him a lot. Like, this is a lot. When you see his complete program, he gave me 3 weeks to get him feeling better because he had 13 athletes coming in for the NFL Combine. And he had no capability to be able to work. And that's how he makes his money. And he's got a pregnant wife and he's freaking out. That was going on. I had 3 weeks. So I hit him with a lot of stuff. Gave him age. I want to talk about an antibiotic that actually has been shown to reduce vulnerable plaque, stabilize endothelial issues, and restore end function. If you guys haven't seen a lot of the studies on aged garlic extract, you got to check that one out because there's over 850 published pieces of literature on it.
Yeah, it's very
from
rich
leading
with
cardiologists.
quercetin. It's very rich with quercetin.
It's rich. And it also has something called S-allylcysteine when they age it. So
yeah.
you get a lot of glutathione from it.
Acetylcysteine, yes.
And
yeah.
so then you have vitamin D. We gave him some adrenal cortex to get his his morning cortisol to come back up. And then we put him on the synapsin nasal spray. And then the last few things we did was we gave him BPC 157, which is a peptide to heal the gut lining and also to help the brain. We switched him to T4, T3 from his Armour thyroid, and we reduced his dose because he was massively overdosing his thyroid and wasn't really having an effect. His testosterone down by about 2/3. And then we put him on an 1,800 calorie allergen elimination diet, modified low carb. So we got him rid of high allergen foods. Here's what happened.
The reason why he has high estrone is because of the obesity, and that certain way turned the testosterone to estrogen, right? Or something like that. Why he has high estrone?
Yeah, no, he's overweight. And,
so he cannot metabolize estrogen, right?
That's right. Exactly. So we in 1 week, he saw his brain was much clearer the first day on his nasal spray. We continued on the program. We tested his food allergens. We got him off of his allergic foods. So on week 2, 3/31/18, all pain and inflammation's almost gone, mentally sharp, no headache or any symptom of concussion, energy improving daily, bloating almost gone after going off his vegan protein shake because he was allergic to pea, which I'm finding all the time in people because they're eating ground up micronized peas instead of eating whole peas. And so they're getting these micronized peas hitting the gut that's leaky, and then they start to trigger to the protein. And his blood pressure went down 20 points to 138/90. At 8 weeks, his head was totally clear. He had no GI distress. His mood is consistent. He had no midday fatigue. He had lost 12 pounds. We did start him on some ipamorelin. The reason we did that was to try to just restore his GH because he's 52 years old and because he had the head hit. That was temporary. And then we would keep him on his BPC 157. And now he's basically healthy. They're expecting their second kid and he's got a thriving business. He got over his TBI, but he was a perfect example of someone that hit his head and his belly was throwing off so many inflammatory compounds because a lot of that GI distress happened after he had his TBI.
And what was the, I'm sorry to butt in here. And so the bloating and the gut issues from the traumatic brain injury, obviously, and what was maybe the most important connection? What was it? What was the most direct cause of the bloating? I guess I'm trying to ask.
Well, there's 2 things. One is he was an athlete, so I think he probably had some gut permeability problems from overtraining. So he already had a little bit of gut permeability problems, but when you hit your head. Let me go back. Remember this picture.
Yeah, you will have sympathetic overactivity.
Almost there.
Right. Sympathetic
Right here.
overactivities leads to activation of NOx enzyme. NOx enzymes generate free radicals, cause inflammation, damaging into the gut epithelium, and leakage there. So the connection is sympathetic.
This is the terminal ileum. Yeah, that's right. It's a sympathetic overdrive for sure.
Right.
And if this is the terminal ileum, this is the terminal ileum on TBI. So the
Right.
gut breaks down relatively quickly. This was that person that you sent me, Kathleen.
Right.
I mean,
Yep.
it's same identical problem, right?
Yep. Young wounded
Um,
warrior. But when you look at the epithelial layer, you know, and you're seeing that the blood-brain barrier and the gut, the inside and outside the gut, the barrier that separates is,
The lamina
thank you, is
propria.
the same. It's made of the same material. So there's communication systemically. It's like when you have a pain in your shoulder, you can have referred pain, or wherever the pain is coming from, it can be referred anywhere else. And so you have a referred signaling directly to the gut. Open up the
Yep.
gut, let in a lot of nutrients in addition to the sympathetic nervous. So as you're saying, Dr. Joseph, there's a lot of different things that are going on to break down this epithelial barrier.
So this was probably kind of going on in him, and then he got a head hit.
Right.
And then it exacerbated
Right.
everything.
Right.
And one of the reasons I did the food allergy panel on him, look, I don't say that getting rid of food allergens is the cause. It's a consequence. But it's a consequence that if I can get them to eat foods that they're not triggering IgG4 or C3BD immune complement pathways or IgE pathways, I'm dipping out of that bucket of inflammatory signaling. So I change their food, and then I work on that gut while I'm getting the brain to heal.
Right.
And that's kind of how this went. And the testosterone, to Dr. Halas's point, at the same time this is going on, he's being overdosed with testosterone and being given armor thyroid without him realizing he's got antibodies to his thyroid and shouldn't be taking thyroid tissue. So all those things were intersecting. And so but the thing, Dr. Joseph, is that think of it in those relationships. I don't care if you ever use this, other than if you start to break things down and put them in a bucket, you can start to see the relationships between the systems, and then you can go, aha, this is where I need to work. This is where I need to start.
I'm actually very intrigued, extremely intrigued.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's I can see I can see the light. There's a light that I can see that I have a direction, which is I'm just very excited.
Oh, good.
And again, you know, I'm coming at this from a different angle because we've been working with the nanomedicine, methylene blue, working with the growth factors that are inside of the nanoparticles, and
Sure.
and you know, like I said, we've been talking about the nasal spray. I've been doing this stuff actually. I've got the equipment at my house, and so it's also clicking into place. You know, the relationship between the traumatic brain injury causing the neuroinflammation and increased sympathetic tone and dampened parasympathetic, which is one of the routes, one of the major routes that's causing the bloating. And that's what I think for myself. That's the thing. I like it when eventually it becomes concrete, and it's like, wow, that is definitely happening, or like you said, one of the triads. And you know, and I'm also wondering if in addition to everything that treatment being brilliant, if now we can maybe even start to add like the nasal spray, because that's having such a direct effect on neuroinflammation and oxidative stress at the same time. What effect will that have on the autonomic nervous system and the gut symptoms directly?
No, I think that adding that therapy is critical, because now you're fast tracking. And now what you can do with looking at kind of this metabolic approach is, what do I give to enhance the repair of nutrients? You know, repair of tissues with nutrients, right? So you can target the secondary benefits. And so I think, look, the bottom line is the quicker you get people out of neuroinflammation, the quicker you get them out of oxidative, redox poise issues, right? Shifted towards oxidative, damage, the quicker you're going to get them to repair.
Yeah, so basically
great.
what he did is he fixed the metabolic part of the problem, which is very important. And now if you want to add more, you can go ahead with intranasal spray of platelet-derived exosome loaded with methylene blue and NAC and B12, and that helps to heal the gliosis of the brain and help to restore the neuroplasticity of the brain and help to decrease sympathetic tone far there. But you don't do this before you fix the metabolic. That's the reason we need to do nitroredox medicine or metabolic therapies, and then we do biologics. We don't do biologics and then do metabolic. We fix the metabolic with simple things, just by exclusion of certain diet that aggravate, and by checking the lab and see how you can fix it. And after that, you can go ahead and add biologics and peptides and other things to add layer. But if you do biologics before metabolic, you're not getting as a result as doing metabolic and then biologics.
Well, I think Kathleen and I, we're pretty simpatico on how we look at things. And I always had issues with people that just jumped in and started shooting a bunch of peptides into people, or just started with biologics without understanding that, you know, in a field of weeds, you just can't throw seeds. You got to cultivate that soil first.
It's the same thing with the stem cell group.
Soil. Don't throw those seeds in those weeds.
Right.
And that's kind of, you know, my point when I was teaching in a lot of the peptide courses. I was trying to get across to doctors, look, don't be wowed by this, because you're going to increase the efficacy of your treatment by correcting the metabolic shifts. And now you bring these incredible advanced medicines in.
Yeah.
Now you can super accelerate how well a person gets and how well they can repair, because you've created a cultivated and fertile soil for those beautiful, you know, advanced treatments to seed themselves into the terrain of the individual, right? Because in the end, it's terrain. And so you change the terrain, then you can really repair.
It's true. It's absolutely true. I agree.
Let's say, for example, in this case, like here, and you have too much of interleukin 6 going on, and you give them thymosin beta, which actually shift to Th2 things from Th1 to Th2, you may aggravate the whole condition. So It's really important to fix the metabolic and not shooting in the dark, because those people who are shooting peptides without knowing the effect of peptides on the cytokines, they may aggravate the whole condition.
You know, one of the things I agree with you guys, and one of the most important things I see here, though, is the ability to take this and make these grids and things that make it clinically understandable to ancillary staff and to the patient. And, you know, all we're talking about is fantastic. But I think one of the key elements that I see in Dr. Lavelle's presentation is a way to make it super practical, kind of in the manner that we've seen Dr. Urim, you know, a very practical, applicable thing, which he's showing here now.
Right. So the other thing
I noticed that
is that we're going to have Dr. James and myself every Thursday, and we're going to have doctors bringing their cases, and we're going to help them to help them with their protocols. And I think that's a good accomplish that we can do, because they will be hard to treat cases. Those doctors will bring on the table and they need help. So they bring their cases, history and exam and all that, and then we can help them. I think if we do that every Thursday, we can help a lot of doctors in implementing those protocols.
I agree. It has to be translatable to your staff and to your patient as well. You know what I mean?
Somebody's having a party.
Woo-hoo. Somebody's kids got home.
Right. So do you have any questions for Dr. James?
Yeah, I have a quick questions. I mean, this is really very good presentations and a lot of information. And but I mean, I think at the end, I mean, and this last case that he presented is really very interesting because it's putting it in perspective that the case of a TBI that caused all this disruption. But my question is like when he approached it with the first one is like to approach the target the stress response. Looks like this case, it seems like most of what was going on in that guy was actually in the brain, and then everything else is what we see as the end results, as whether it's a hormonal or metabolic effects. How did he figure out that this is like the way to approach it to target the brain? And the other part of it is like, so basically, what was the main target on the level of the brain to reverse the inflammation or metabolic derangement on the level of the central nervous system?
Okay. So, I mean, I was trying for downregulation of microglial cells and then increasing resolvin in the brain to downregulate inflammasome activity that's occurring, to downregulate the oxidative damage that was going on ongoing, because the TBI was not, he was still feeling the results of it. Why I gave him something for stress was independent of the fact that he had a TBI. It was because he was stressed. he was stressed out and he was craving food. And so I wanted to change his eating pattern. And I did that merely as a consequence, right? It was a consequence that I wanted to change, because I knew that if I could get him to feel more calm and feel less anxious, I would be downregulating his sympathetic tone, which is aggravating his brain. It's going to be affecting his neuroinflammation. And I'm wanting to quiet his peripheral nervous system, get his appetite and reward system back, while I'm specifically targeting his brain to try to get it to heal. So the purpose of that was because he was saying, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm craving carbs, I'm getting up at night to eat. That is a sympathetic tone issue. And so I want to dampen that while I'm directly attacking, utilizing things to get his brain to heal.
But
That
there
was
is more than brain injury here. There is,
yes, exactly.
he also has high testosterone. That itself is causing cortisol high because it's causing the absorption of the water, hypertension, and
Yep.
and also he's taking thyroid tissue, and he has sort of Hashimoto thyroiditis or thyroiditis inflammation as well. So there's inflammation of thyroid, there's testosterone he's taking, plus the gliosis from the TBI. And I think you are trying to fix all of those things at once, right?
Well,
And
I
you have
had
short
3
period of
weeks.
time to fix
I
it.
had 3
There must be
weeks.
more things needs to be done for this patient, like
Yeah.
platelet lysates intranasal can be done. Of course, you remove the testosterone, which is very good, and you prove his, that itself, it's a big factor when you remove the testosterone.
Yeah.
Well, nothing would ever be finished in 3 weeks. That was what Jim was given, and it's typically this way because people have deadlines. But the reality is,
Oh.
you don't win a game every time in the first quarter, right? You
Nope.
can lose the first quarter, but you got to win the fourth quarter. That's what matters, right? You could be 28 points behind, and you can come back in 3 minutes. So you got to remember that. But it's all about the strategizing of how to do that, which is what Jim did. He gave him a lot of products, and likely he wouldn't give him so many things at once,
Oh,
generally speaking,
no,
but he was
no.
given 3 weeks. And so this is all in the in the situation that you're in. And the other thing is, I think, Jim, this guy was on testosterone, right? So
He was on.
testosterone was not a result necessarily. If he
No,
had
he
low
was on
testosterone,
125. Yeah, he was on 125 milligrams of testosterone per injection.
but to be clear, testosterone, low testosterone was not necessarily the result of the brain injury. It sounds like
Oh,
he had
no,
been,
but taking
right.
testosterone
No,
complicates
I understand
metabolic
that.
disorder.
Yeah, I understand
Yeah,
that.
he
But
had it previous.
Mhm,
He had
yeah,
it previous to the
previous,
injury.
yep.
That is correct.
Right. And nobody
Yeah.
was checking to see what the result was.
Well, he
So
hadn't been checked in a year and a half.
right, then it was compounding the issue.
Yeah, he hadn't been checked in a year and a half.
Right.
And I typically would not give that much to someone. Now, subsequently over the next 2 years, we were able to kind of dial him in, and it's now he has a lifestyle that's working for him, and he feels good. He's learned how to eat. And, so, I've, other cases I can show where, you give them 4 things, right? The right 4 things, and you can start to get gratifying results. So really it depends on the individual.
So
I just
this
brought this up
case
to show
will
you
be
guys.
benefit from doing endothelial function test and
Yes.
from the
Oh
beginning
my gosh.
of it. That will be something dramatic for this patient. So after 3 months, you can go ahead and measure it. And if you have that result has been improved, then all your work you're doing is working.
And I just to add on to Kathleen's point about you don't win the game in the fourth quarter, but when you've got a patient, and these patients are demanding because there are these pressures, you want some early wins. So if you get rid of that stress, that psychological stress, and help dampen that, you get an early win, you kind of keep them on track. Because if you don't get a couple early wins, you're gone.
Yeah, I'm all about that. I mean, that's why I developed the system to begin with, is to get people to get the early wins. Like, where do you need to focus? Because this is where all their symptoms are and where all their labs are at, whatever that triad that's out of balance, attack that so that you get them feeling better, and then use your strategy for the long-term haul of how I'm going to repair you and get you into a healthy lifespan, right?
Okay, let me just finalize this because I think the time is running here, and we have a sponsor here, which his name is Ken Beck. He's sponsoring the whole activities here, and we want to make sure that everybody here needs to have his endothelial function test and ANS. If we have that to this patient, we can really monetize the treatments knowing its efficacy. And I think Mr. Ken here, who has the system, who can place it for free in your clinic with no upfront charge. And if you have cases, you can schedule those cases. So go ahead a little bit about it. So even maybe you can work with Dr. James. He has a huge network of doctors. And I like Ken because he can place the system upfront for free, or you can schedule all your cases one day. He can go ahead and do it. And financially, you will be kind of working with them as well.
Hi, everyone. Great presentation. Wow. So I'm just going to take a few brief minutes, and we're Pulse for Pulse, the premier autonomic vascular and cardio risk assessment service across the US. And we require 0 startup cost, no staff requirement, billing services, and sorry, it's blocking my enhanced patient care and new practice revenue. And let's see if I can get this. There we go. Sorry, we believe that early detection or EDM is the key to successful treatment. And obviously, and I came up with a nickname for the doctors here that we'll call them super doctors, call you guys. So you're obviously very, very advanced, and we like to identify disease indicators in asymptomatic patients while utilizing cutting edge preventive screenings and technology. So, and I'm just going to go through this very briefly. Millions of Americans have chronic disease that goes undiagnosed. Nearly 1 in 4 patients or adults with diabetes don't know they have a condition.
Let's go. We can turn the phone on. And we can go. We can make it.
50% of people with PAD are asymptomatic. And of course, there's nothing good on this slide. PAD that goes undiagnosed or untreated can lead to gangrene, amputation, 4 to 5 times greater risk for heart attack or stroke. And I did hear the testing that we offer, and I'm not a physician, so many of the doctors on the Zoom can explain the medical portion, but I did hear about the testing during your wonderful presentation. We have a motto, test, don't guess. Physicians often refer out when in-office diagnostic tools are insufficient. And we like to keep everything in-house, keep the income in the practice, and the ease of the patient is just a lot simpler and more convenient for the patient. We also provide a test that's available immediately. The tests are about 20 minutes long, non-invasive. And we have a turnkey system. We like to be like Navy SEALs. We don't want the doctors to know we're there. We follow right in their stream of their practice. We have an intake questionnaire indicating clinical qualifiers and medical necessity. Our technician explains the test and performs the test, provides real-time results. We have a proprietary algorithm. We're the only ones that have that. It's a condensed report, which is available at the conclusion of the test. We also have a very long report that's sent via EMR EHR. So that's available and sent within 1 to 2 days. But the condensed report, doctors love it. There's a ton of information on there. There are 4 main tests, ANS, which I heard throughout the evening, of course, endothelial dysfunction, pseudomotor, and ABI. We have this state-of-the-art equipment, the Rolls-Royce of the industry, and the only equipment we've seen that does all the tests and pays up to 5 billing codes. This is the endothelial dysfunction slide, and I can revert to Dr. Halaza to explain this, or one of the other physicians if you would like, or we could certainly get on a private call with one of our medical people. COVID-19, comorbidities, greatly affect the recovery rate, underlying asymptomatic conditions. Sadly, as our CMO states, many of these people are no longer with us. So we have a little signage with the doctor's blessing. We put it at the check-in. And patients are absolutely asking to take this test. These are some of the major illnesses and other hidden diseases. Certainly, it changes depending on the specialty, but we deal with about 22 specialties and subspecialties. But we really get to the root causes. A physician asked, hypertension. The doctor said, well, I already know the patient's hypertensive. How's this going to help me? So we posed that question to our CMO. He said, we can absolutely change the treatment protocol, get to the root cause, change the meds and the whole treatment portion, so the doctor just absolutely loved that part. Improving care standards, the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, I literally called them. They were extremely supportive. Our tests are listed all over their websites. We also have the American, the neurology, neurological surgery, I should say, an American Urological Association. We're passionate about prevention without having to refer patients out. We do it at the comfort of your office. Patients can be tested up to 4 times per year, covered by all major insurances, Medicare, Medicaid, and we also have a cash model. We use 60% will qualify, but many of the doctors on the call and that I've spoken with, they'll test more than 60% because they want to get the information. They want to track the results. But it is approved up to 4 times per year. We also can do telemedicine. We have the approval for that, which has been a real blessing. So this, I discussed this already. This is our patient questionnaire. Sorry, there's a recording coming on. Patient questionnaire, pulse for pulse, explains the test. These are just really simple steps. We provide the real-time results to the doctor, medical technician, schedules patients for the follow-up visits with the doctor's blessing and permission. We bill the insurance on behalf of the physician. The doctors receive full remittances to their practice. You're always in control of all of the money. And then we invoice only on paid EOBs. So it's been a wonderful profit center, but a tremendous amount of information. This is a sample report, red light, yellow light, green light. Our CMO is constantly updating. He's just never satisfied. We even have a 3D image of the heart now on the reports. These are the billable codes. And insurance companies are not only paying, they've been very stable, but they're actually increasing them, not because they're nice people necessarily, because they want to save money, prevent an adverse event, heart attack, stroke, or worse. This is the eligibility. Only one of these conditions would need to be checked for medical necessity. Many of the doctors we talk to with elderly patients kind of look at us a little bit funny and say, my patients would check yes to most all these. So, but we only really need one. And, but we do use 60% because we would like to under-promise and over-deliver. So we see 60% will qualify and 30% will take the test. That's the national average. This is, we deal with everyone from single practitioners, MSOs, IPAs, and all the way up to the very large hospital groups. And this really sums everything up. There's again, a tremendous amount of information. Doctors love the reporting. We don't require anything up front. We provide the equipment, the staff, and it's a turnkey system. So Dr. Halaz, I want to turn it right back over to you. I know it's getting late, so I just went through this very briefly. If anybody would like to reach out or have a kind of a private Zoom, answer any questions, we'll make ourselves available at any time for you. And we thank you for inviting us and having us speak.
Thank you, Ken.
So,
Sure
so I
appreciate it. It's a
think
fantastic
we're getting
machine.
too late and people are waiting for us for the dinner. I'm in Idaho right now with Michael and they are meeting us in the restaurant. But I want you to share your information in the text or share your phone number and everybody will reach out to you if they're interested. And we want everybody to have the system because this will definitely help you to monetize all the nitroredox therapy or metabolic therapy of Dr. James. And Dr. James, can you call me? Because I called you and it seems like my phone and your phone, and they don't like each other. So just text me something so I can send you the email so you can send me your PPT PowerPoint, if you don't mind, Dr. James, if you're still there. Text me and I will text you and be in communication with Dr. Kathleen because I want you to team up with Dr. Kathleen and come every Thursday if we can work together as a team to help those doctors because Chronic Disease Prevention Management Center, part of it is nitroredox therapy, which is the metabolic therapy. And I think you can help me with that branch while we're going to do some biologic, which is nanomedicine basically, and photoregenerative, photodynamic. It's part of the chronic disease prevention protocols, but your presence, and then I will help you to promote your software because your software is excellent. Possibly we're gonna add to your software a lot of other things because I think you're focusing more on nutrition We also need to focus also on medication. And Dr. Mike Beamer, as a pharmacist, he will be the pharmacist of the group, supplying you with all the pharmaceuticals you need. We are getting injectable pharmacy on the board, and Mike Beamer is closing that deal. And we're gonna get you all any state, any country. We ship overseas as well. So we're working on that deal. And then in nutrition and the software and the protocols of Dr. James will be part of this. So Dr. Kathleen and I and James, we're gonna work on that. But having every Thursday meetings, helping doctors with their hard to treat cases, especially Dr. Tom, he has his hard to treat cases every week. And all of you can bring it here and we can help you to customize the protocol from different angle, from different brain. You have how many, 15 or 18 brains here. So you get the best deal here. Otherwise, if you have any questions or concern, we still have Thursday, every Thursday. So please come every Thursday and we can answer all your questions.
Been a great sense of fellowship too. We've been doing this for almost a year now, and there's a group of 50 people, all of whom a number of them come every when they can, and everyone knows each other, and since we can't have live and in-person conferences and have the fellowship that we enjoy with our colleagues, this is one nice way to do it while we're experiencing the pandemic. So I think people appreciate that as well as I do.
So do you have any questions? Everybody's happy? Dr. Tom, are you happy?
I'm happy.
Okay, I need everybody to be happy. See you next Thursday. And thank you very much for coming.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you,
So,
Jim. Thank
so
you.
wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good
Ciao,
night.
ciao.
Dr. LaBelle, very, very good.